After that satisfying moment of knocking out Yin Feilong, I quickly looted everything from him. Potions, badges, all of it. My score jumped to 210 points, with 180 coming from him alone. I got rich off that one takedown. After that, I played it safe. There was no reason to risk everything I'd earned. I moved carefully, always checking my escape routes, never letting myself get cornered. Because of that, I didn't find any more good opportunities, but I didn't lose anything either. In the final hour, the whole exam zone got tense and quiet. Most examinees had been eliminated. Out of 10,000, fewer than 2,000 were left. The big teams from Tiantai First High had grown to 20 or 30 people, rolling over everyone. Even strong fighters like Lei Qianjun and Su Qingying from my city's First High got separated and had to fight alone. That's the gap between a provincial capital's top school and ours. In the last 30 minutes, everyone seemed to silently agree to stop fighting. I hid in a basement, suppressed my presence completely, and just waited out the clock like a patient hunter. When the countdown hit 0, the exam was finally over. We all gathered back on the platform. The examiners appeared and announced the results on a huge light screen. I found my name and couldn't believe it. 305 total points, ranked 288th. I'd expected to barely stay in the top 1,000, but I'd made it into the top 300. It made sense once I thought about it. During the brutal fighting in the second half, tons of people lost their points stealing from each other or got eliminated at the last second. Meanwhile, I'd secured my big score early, then played it extremely safe. That cautious approach ended up paying off perfectly. Qin Xiaoxiao and Lu Zhenlong were in the top 10. Lei Qianjun and Su Qingying made it into the top 100. The top 100 was dominated by Tiantai First High students. But then I started hearing whispers about myself, people confused by my name and my school. Haiqing Grain District Second High? What kind of school is that? A nobody school producing a top 300 fighter. No way. I couldn't help but laugh. I never expected my results would put my little no-name high school on the same scoreboard as all these elite academies. It felt pretty surreal. The exam was officially over. Examiner Deng Hong announced that all of us survivors now had the right to choose any private martial arts university within the joint exam scope. The enrollment info would be sent to our terminals in 3 days. She also warned everyone not to bring any grudges from the exam outside. Martial arts were banned in Tiantai City, and violators would face detention or even lose their exam qualifications. We left in batches by exam number. Mine was near the end, so I was one of the last to go. All I wanted was to find Bai Mushi, eat a good meal, and sleep. Walking out into the afternoon sun, I squinted. It was almost too bright after days inside that dark exam zone. The outside world felt like a completely different place. I took a deep breath of the messy city air, and it felt wonderful. Before I could even open my terminal to call Mushi, I felt hostile stares. It was Lei Qianjun and Su Qingying, and next to them stood someone with thick bandages wrapped all over his face, only his eyes showing, eyes full of hatred. That had to be Yin Feilong. That level of grudge could only belong to him. Then I heard Bai Mujia shouting from the other direction, "Brother-in-law?" Over here. Mushi and her uncle Bai Jinyun were there too, all smiling. I walked straight over to them. Mushi rushed up and looked me over carefully, wincing at the bruises on my face and body. I grinned and told her I was fine. Mujia was completely shocked that I'd survived all the way through the second stage. He'd been eliminated in the first stage and couldn't believe it. Uncle Jinyun looked stunned too. I could tell he was realizing I was much stronger than he'd thought. I just said I was hungry and suggested we go eat. I didn't know it at the time, but behind us, Su Qingying was coldly questioning Yin Feilong about what happened to him. He only said he'd been ambushed. He refused to admit that a nobody had taken him out in the most humiliating way possible. Lei Qianjun told him bluntly to go train harder if he wasn't good enough. Yin Feilong was furious but couldn't say anything back. He just stared after me with pure hatred. That night, Yin Feilong was already digging into my background. Some guy named Wang Hao called him and reported that I was connected to a classmate's friend. Specifically, I was Bai Mujia's brother-in-law or something like that. Yin Feilong ordered him to find out everything about me. He clearly wasn't planning to let this go. I had no idea Yin Feilong was already digging into my background. I was too busy stuffing my face at the fancy rotating restaurant on top of the Tianyue International Hotel. Uncle Jinyun was treating everyone to celebrate. He said it was for both me and Mujia passing the exam, even though Mujia didn't even get past the first stage. But that didn't stop the two of them from showering me with compliments all through dinner. "You're amazing, Chia. Top 288. That's top 10 in all of Haiching." Mujia turned into my biggest fanboy on the spot. I just kept shoveling grilled meat into my mouth and gave vague responses. After days of barely eating in that exam zone, food was the only thing on my mind. Mushi sat beside me, pouring juice and watching me eat with that warm smile of hers. After I finished, Uncle Jinyun carefully brought up the topic of which university I'd apply to. I told him I hadn't decided yet. I wanted to wait for all the enrollment guides first. He explained that with my score, even first-tier private universities were within reach. A full scholarship might be tough at those top schools, but second-tier ones would definitely offer one. Then he said something that surprised me. He told me not to worry about tuition at all, just pick the best school. He and my father-in-law would cover everything. Apparently, when Uncle Jinyun told my father-in-law Bai Junfeng about my results, the old man was completely stunned. Their family had never produced anyone who could even touch the threshold of a top martial arts university. His attitude toward me did a complete 180. He immediately told his brother to take care of me and that the Bai family would pay for whatever school I chose. I wanted to refuse. I don't like owing people. But Mushi placed her hand over mine and nodded with a gentle smile. This was her father finally recognizing me, and recognizing her choice too. Seeing that look in her eyes, I accepted and thanked them sincerely. Mujia then asked if I'd be interested in meeting some of his classmates who were all dying to meet the dark horse of the exam. I had zero interest in that kind of socializing. They just wanted to ride my coattails. Before I even had to make an excuse, Uncle Jinyun stepped in and said I needed rest first. Smart man. Mujia quickly agreed, and I was happy to leave it at that. Back in our hotel room, I finally collapsed onto the sofa and let everything go. Mushi brought me warm water and sat beside me. I pulled her close, breathed in the scent of her hair, and all the exhaustion from those days just melted away. For the next 3 days, I stayed in and relaxed completely. I walked with Mushi, chatted with her, and practiced my 8 treasures technique at a lazy pace. On the 3rd afternoon, I hit level 5. My gene potential climbed to 10.3%, and my physical and mental stats were both over 102. Slow but steady progress. Right then, my terminal buzzed with a flood of notifications. Dozens of official emails from private martial arts universities poured in all at once. The enrollment guides were finally here. I opened one of the emails, and a beautifully designed brochure appeared on the light screen. Golden borders, animated school emblems. Everything screamed prestige. Galaxy Martial Arts University. Founded in year 1 of the Empire. One of the most decorated schools in the entire Galactic War. Just seeing the name made my breath catch. I'd read about this school my whole life. In history books, news, hero biographies. It wasn't just a university. It was a symbol of the Empire's martial spirit, standing alongside Longtan Martial Arts University as the twin pillars of the Empire. Their admission standards were clear. Top 10 gets a full scholarship with S-rank training resources and a personal mentor. Top 50 gets half scholarship with A-rank resources. Top 500 pays full tuition, and the cutoff was top 10,000. Longtan's standards were almost identical. There were other great schools too. Golden Bull Martial Arts University, Titan Martial Arts Academy, making up the first tier. With my ranking, I could easily get a full ride at any second-tier school. But the moment I saw those 2 top schools, nothing else mattered. I wanted the best education, the strongest classmates. That's the path of a true warrior. But which one? Galaxy or Longtan? That was the hard part. Mushi leaned over to look, and her eyes went wide. These were the ultimate dream schools for every martial arts student, and her husband could walk right in. She was so excited she was practically glowing, her hand drifting to her belly as if silently telling our babies about their dad. At lunch, Uncle Jinyun and Mujia joined in the debate. Mujia was all for Longtan. He'd read online that their combat courses were cutting-edge and lots of new military war gods were Longtan graduates. Uncle Jinyun preferred Galaxy for its deep roots and alumni network spanning the Empire's military, government, and business worlds. I listened politely, but I could tell their knowledge was just stuff anyone could find on forums. For a family like the Bays, these schools were impossibly distant. Both universities' branch campuses weren't even in Tiantai City. They were in Tela, the capital of our star system's main planet. Tela. Across the galactic empire, nearly every planet names its capital, Tela, not from lack of imagination, but as tribute to the one true Tela star, the empire's origin and heart. The real Tela is everything: political center, economic engine, cultural source, and above all, the martial arts holy land where Galaxy and Longten have their headquarters. Every martial artist dreams of setting foot there, but for 99.99% of citizens, it's just a fantasy. The travel costs and identity barriers make it completely unreachable. Our star system's main planet had its own Tela too, where the branch campuses of both universities were located, along with the Martial Arts Association headquarters and major corporate offices. Even that was far beyond anything the Bai family or most people in Haiqing had real knowledge of. I chose Galaxy Martial Arts University. Both top schools were equally strong, and the internet was full of arguments for each one. But what sealed it for me was one line in Galaxy's brochure about their highest honor tradition. Any student who breaks through 100% gene potential within 10 years of enrollment can join the Galaxy Exploration Team as vice captain, exploring and pioneering frontier star regions. Pioneering a new planet. Those words hit me like lightning. It wasn't just adventure. It was lighting the spark of civilization on an untouched world, carving your name into the very first page of a planet's history. And with my system, I could spread my bloodline freely on a brand new world, building a dynasty from nothing. The thought set my mind on fire. Mushi just held my hand and said quietly, "Wherever you go, I'll follow." Right as I was about to hit submit, my terminal buzzed with a video call. It was my old homeroom teacher, Mr. Zhou Deming. When the screen lit up, his face was red with excitement, almost distorted. Behind him, the entire school staff was crowded in, including the principal with his shiny bald head gleaming over Mr. Zhou's shoulder. Turns out, when the official results were sent to my school, the principal's first reaction was that the system had glitched. Our school had never produced anyone close to the top 300. Our best ever result was barely scraping into the top 10,000. He had people verify it multiple times before believing it. Mr. Zhou was practically shouting, calling it the greatest result in our school's history and the most incredible achievement from any non-elite high school in Haiqing in 100 years. I just smiled and said I got lucky. Then the principal squeezed into frame and started asking about my plans. I mentioned being worried about tuition, and he jumped at the chance, suggesting I apply to Golden Bull Martial Arts University, where I could get a full scholarship. When I told him I was applying to Galaxy Martial Arts University, his smile froze. He quickly switched to his wise elder voice and started trying to talk me out of it. Galaxy is too competitive. It's full of geniuses with resources and connections. Better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Golden Bull is the top school in our star system. You'd get their best resources there. And I happen to know their admissions director personally. I can get you double S-rank training resources. He sounded so sincere, like he truly cared about my future. But what I didn't know at the time was that Golden Bull's admissions director had just contacted him with an offer. If the principal convinced me to enroll there, he'd personally receive 1,000,000 credit points as a referral bonus. I politely listened to the principal finish his pitch, then shook my head and told him my decision was final. Galaxy Martial Arts University. He got more desperate, telling me some cautionary tale about a former student who went to a first-tier school and got crushed by all the geniuses with better backgrounds and talent, ending up back in our district with nothing to show for it. I almost laughed. His advice might work on someone else, but not me. My secret system meant I'd only keep getting stronger as long as I kept having children. No amount of rich geniuses could change that equation. When the principal saw I wouldn't budge, he tried one last thing. He told me to take a few days, talk to my family before submitting. What I didn't know was that right after hanging up, he secretly messaged both my parents, offering them 200,000 credit points as a school grant if they could convince me to apply to Golden Bull Martial Arts University instead. The principal had done his homework on my family. He figured my parents, who relied on birth subsidies and watched every credit, would jump at that kind of money. To him, poor people would always choose cash over prestige. Behind all of this was the Yin family. The principal's contact at Golden Bull's admissions office was Yin Xingzhan. the older brother of Yin Xingwu, vice president of Haiqing's Martial Arts Association and Yin Feilong's father. The principal assumed the Yin family admired me from the exam and wanted to recruit me, which was why they were offering 1,000,000 credits as a referral fee. He thought I was an idiot for not taking the easy road. But the truth was completely different. At that same time, Yin Feilong was talking to his father. Yin Xingwu told his son to drop the grudge against me. In his eyes, I was just a rootless nobody who could eventually be recruited as a pawn for their family. He ordered Yin Feilong to show generosity to win me over as a future asset. Yin Feilong agreed on the surface, but inside he was burning with even more hatred. His father also told him he'd be going to Golden Bull instead of Galaxy. The family had arranged it. Yin Feilong accepted, but silently swore he'd use every advantage his uncle's connections at Golden Bull could give him, get stronger as fast as possible, and one day crush me beneath his feet. None of them knew what I was really capable of, and none of their schemes were going to change my path. Sitting in the hotel room after that call with the principal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about his advice. All that talk about connections and resources, it sounded nice, but I didn't buy his sudden generosity. And with my system, none of those things mattered nearly as much as he thought. Then my mother called. The moment I saw her face, I knew the principal had gotten to them. She and my father started pushing hard for Golden Bull Martial Arts University, repeating all the same talking points. Great resources, connections, a sure path to success. My mother kept insisting the difference between Golden Bull and Galaxy was just a name. My father jumped in too, being unusually friendly at first, then turning harsh. He said that without a full scholarship, without connections, I'd be dead last at Galaxy. He said if I chose Galaxy, they wouldn't support me at all, as if they'd been supporting me in the first place. My exam registration fee was half from Mushi and half from a loan I took out myself. I knew exactly what was happening. The principal had promised them something. Money, most likely. I'd known my parents long enough not to be surprised. Rather than drag this out, I decided to end it. I told them I'd already submitted my application and that Imperial law didn't allow changes. While still on the call, I filled in my information on Galaxy's application page and hit submit. Then I screenshot the confirmation and sent it to my mother. My father stormed off without a word. My mother awkwardly said they respected my choice and that they'd only meant well. I just said, I know, and left it at that. I sent the same screenshot to my homeroom teacher, Mr. Zhou. He instantly dropped the Golden Bull topic and sent back a cheerful congratulations, saying he was proud to have taught a future Galaxy student. I put my terminal on silent and tossed it aside. I was done with all of it. Looking out at the city lights, I knew my life had changed completely. All those voices trying to control me with family guilt and false concern, they were already fading behind me. Mushi came up quietly and hugged me from behind, resting her cheek against my back. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That warmth melted away the last bit of irritation in my chest. Within 30 minutes, Galaxy's response arrived, a formal acceptance letter with a golden school crest. I was officially enrolled. I needed to report to the Telecity campus by October 1st, about a month away. The capital was a 10-hour high-speed train ride from Tianhai City. After everything with my parents and the principal, I had no desire to go back to Haiqing. I turned to Mushi and suggested we head straight to Telecity early to get familiar with the place. Her eyes lit up immediately. Let's go, she said. Wherever I went, she was ready to follow. The next morning, I told Uncle Jinyun I wanted to head straight to Telecity instead of going back to Haiqing. He looked a little disappointed. Apparently, my father-in-law wanted to throw a big celebration banquet and show off his son-in-law who got into Galaxy Martial Arts University. But Mushi stepped in right away and said we weren't going back, that I needed rest, and didn't like that kind of scene. I was grateful she handled it. Mujia suggested they all come along to Tela as a trip, and Uncle Jinyun agreed. He saw it as a chance to strengthen our relationship. Mushi started to refuse, but I gently held her hand to let her know it was fine. Meanwhile, Yin Feilong got the news from his father that I'd chosen Galaxy instead of Golden Bull. He was furious at first, but his father told him to calm down and think logically. A guy with no resources, no connections, and no family backing going to Galaxy was basically a wasted move. After thinking it over, Yin Feilong actually felt better. He convinced himself I'd be crushed by all the real geniuses there. while he'd rise fast at Golden Bull with his uncle's support. He was already picturing my failure. That afternoon, my father-in-law Bai Zhenfeng and his wife rushed over from Haiqing to join us. They treated me like royalty, even warmer than before. Zhenfeng had booked VIP train tickets and a hotel in Tella. I accepted their kindness without making a fuss. They were family, after all, and I understood what they were doing. The train ride took 10 hours. The Bai family spent most of it chatting excitedly about Tella and Galaxy University, always circling back to me. I mostly just looked out the window, my mind already on what lay ahead. Mushi sat quietly beside me reading a book about pregnancy nutrition, perfectly content. When the train pulled into Tella City, I saw it for the first time through the window, and my breath caught. If Tiantai City was impressive, Tella was something out of a dream. Crystal-like skyscrapers pierced the sky. Hovering traffic lanes crisscrossed the air hundreds of times more dense than anything I'd seen before, and I even spotted small private starships gliding overhead, leaving faint energy trails. This was the real deal, a true city of the future. We checked into the star-crowned Interstellar Hotel, sitting on top of an 800-story tower in the city center. From our suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire glittering cityscape spread out below us. Mushi whispered, "It's so beautiful," and I pulled her close, feeling the same awe. Standing there, I truly understood how small I still was, and how vast this world really is. But instead of feeling crushed by it, a fire lit up inside me. This was where my new life would begin. The next morning, my father-in-law wanted to take everyone to try an ancient breakfast from old Tella tradition. The food cost 500 credits a serving, insane compared to back home. Nobody really liked the taste, but it was an experience. After breakfast, Mushi suggested we go check in at Galaxy Martial Arts University early. She knew I wanted to but wouldn't say it in front of everyone, so she brought it up herself. The Bai family was thrilled. Ordinary people never get the chance to even step inside the campus gates. The university sat in an area called Scholars Forest on the city's northwest side, surrounded by ancient trees and far from the steel jungle downtown. As our hover car entered the area, I could already feel the spiritual energy in the air was much thicker than in the city center. The school gate was massive but simple, white stone with 4 powerful characters carved above, Galaxy Martial Arts. Just looking at them stirred something deep inside me. There was already a long line of new students and families. While waiting, I quietly observed the people around me. The family ahead had a girl who was clearly a warrior, and her father's aura was incredibly deep, far beyond mine. He had 2 wives and 4 younger children. He was lecturing about using this visit as motivation. The family behind me was even more impressive, a couple whose strength I couldn't read at all, with a warrior-level son and 2 daughters. This was the kind of background Galaxy students came from. The couple behind us were friendly and chatted with us. When they learned Mushi was my wife, they were surprised. At our age, marriage usually meant political family alliances. They glanced at my in-laws and seemed puzzled, since the Bai men were only quasi-warriors. They couldn't imagine the real reason we married young, birth subsidies. The Bai family, to their credit, stayed humble and polite, fully aware of the gap between themselves and these families. When I reached the gate, 2 guards in silver-gray uniforms checked my admission letter. Their power was leagues above mine. Even the gatekeepers here were terrifyingly strong. They let us through but told my family they could only visit the plaza and living areas until 6 p.m. Stepping inside, the spiritual energy hit me like a warm bath. The campus opened up into an enormous plaza paved with jade-like stone carved with ancient star maps. At the center stood a 100-meter-tall statue of an unnamed hero. In star armor, sword in hand, gazing into the cosmos, the pioneer statue, personally commissioned by the emperor to honor all who died during the age of exploration. The buildings beyond were nestled among ancient forests, blending history with nature. No steel towers, no neon lights. Just silence and grandeur. Everyone in our group was speechless. At the registration desk, a young female teacher in a fitted black combat suit pulled up my file. Her eyebrows twitched when she read it. She told me my starting rank was 9,988th, assigned to Year 1, Class 10. My gene potential of 10.3% was average, but my martial techniques were a serious problem. She said my radio calisthenics and 8 treasures technique were the lowest tier skills imaginable. too crude even for teaching toddlers. She recommended I switch to higher-level techniques during the month before school started, and said if my skills improved, I might manage to move up from Class 10 to Class 9 within a year. The Bai family was shocked when the teacher called my techniques garbage, but I'd expected it. I asked her for recommendations, and she frowned. Apparently, choosing martial techniques was supposed to be a family matter handled by clan elders or private tutors. She couldn't believe a Galaxy student would need to ask a registration desk teacher about something so basic. My father-in-law stepped forward humbly and explained that we came from a small fourth-tier city with no connections and no resources. I'd gotten in purely on my own. That softened her up. She said proper technique recommendations required a thorough assessment, then showed me her contact code. She offered a private tutoring session that evening for a full-body analysis and technique matching evaluation. The fee, 10,000 credits per session. Everyone winced at the price, but I didn't hesitate. I scanned her code and paid immediately. She looked satisfied and introduced herself as Lin Yuechan, a 10-star transcendent warrior. She told me to come to Teaching Building 10, room 2202, at 8 p.m. Mujia complained afterward about the insane cost, but Uncle Jinyun shut him down fast. This was an investment, not a waste. Getting professional guidance from a Galaxy teacher on technique selection was worth every credit. I agreed silently. We took an automatic hover tram through the campus to the dormitory area. The place felt like its own city. Ancient trees, futuristic buildings, some even floating in midair. The freshman dorm was a tower with 300 floors, one of the tallest structures in Scholars Forest. Mujia nearly lost his mind staring up at it, drawing weird looks from passing students. Inside, a staff member checked my student card and assigned me to floor 298, room 166. Then came the catch. Spiritual energy in the building was densest at the bottom floors and thinnest at the top. Since my entrance ranking was near the bottom, I got stuck near the top where the energy was weakest. Better floors had to be earned through performance. Even the dorms were competitive here. He also warned that destructive technique practice was banned in the dorms. Only gentle internal cultivation was allowed inside. Anything powerful had to be done at designated training halls, or you'd lose your housing permanently. My father-in-law sighed quietly about how everything in this place was a competition, right down to where you slept. I wasn't surprised. Then I asked the question that mattered most to me. Could my wife live with me in the dorm? Mushi was nervous when I asked about her living with me, but the staff member just checked our marriage certificate and approved it. She had to sign an agreement limiting her to the plaza and living areas, but that was fine. They gave her a temporary residence card, and we headed up together. The building had 100 high-speed elevators. We took one to the 298th floor. The hallway was long, metallic, and quiet, rows of identical doors stretching into the distance. Our room, 166, was about 30 square meters, a bedroom, small living room with a desk and a bathroom. Simple but clean. Even up here on the 298th floor, the spiritual energy was noticeably richer than in our hotel. I couldn't imagine what the lower floors must be like. Mushi smiled and said she'd make it our home. That one sentence turned the cold metal room into something warm. I told her this was our new starting point, and that we'd be moving down to a better floor soon. From the massive window, I could see most of Scholars Forest and the golden skyline of Tellus City beyond. This would be where I lived and fought for the next few years. At dinner, my father-in-law transferred me 100,000 credits. I tried to refuse, but he and Uncle Jinyun insisted. Tuition costs, technique purchases, training resources, everything required money. They called it an investment in the family's future. Looking at their earnest faces and Mushi's trusting eyes, I couldn't say no. I promised to spend every credit wisely. At 8 p.m., I went alone to Teaching Building 10, room 2202 for my session with teacher Lin Yuechan. The training room was huge, 200 square meters of space packed with equipment. She stood in the center, sharp-eyed and lean in her black training gear, looking maybe 27 or 28. She got straight to it. She called me a self-taught wild card with an unstable foundation and told me to demonstrate both my techniques so she could assess my true level. I decided not to hold back. I was ranked 9,988th among the new students. She already saw me as a grassroots nobody. There was nothing to gain from hiding. I started with the radio calisthenics. As I moved through the routine, I noticed her expression shift. Each motion flowed perfectly, every stretch and twist engaging my whole body with a rhythm that went beyond what the basic technique was supposed to achieve. When I finished, I wasn't tired at all. I felt even more energized. She stared at me with genuine surprise. Perfection-level radio calisthenics, she murmured. Most people who practiced this technique never even reached mastery. Perfection was 10 times harder than that. She'd assumed I'd be at the mastery level at best, and finding out I'd pushed this basic technique to its absolute limit completely changed her opinion of me. Without pausing, I went straight into my 8 treasures technique demonstration. Lin Yuechan watched carefully and confirmed it was at the mastery level, solid and well-practiced. Then she started explaining something that made my pulse quicken. She said 8 treasures was actually a prerequisite technique for a much higher path called the Body Forging School. The progression went like this. Combine 8 treasures with another D-rank technique called Dragon Tiger Technique to unlock the C-rank 8 treasures Dragon Tiger Force, which leads to the B-rank Diamond Glazed Body, and ultimately to the A-rank Immovable Wisdom King Body. The body forging path sounded incredible, training your physical body into a living divine weapon. At the beginning, you could ignore blades, and at advanced levels your body becomes indestructible, every movement carrying earth-shaking power. Then came the bad news. She said this path was insanely expensive. When you try to fuse the 2 D-rank techniques together, you hit a wall that can only be broken through with high-energy nutrition paste costing hundreds of thousands of credits per day, over a period of 49 to 81 days. Body forging was never meant for someone without deep pockets. But my mind was already racing. Other people needed expensive supplements to force through fusion barriers. I had my system. If I could train both techniques to perfection level, 0 flaws, theoretically perfect, maybe the fusion barrier wouldn't even exist. And even if it didn't work, maxing out 2 D-rank techniques would still boost my gene potential. No downside either way. Lin Yuechan read my expression instantly. She'd seen that stubborn, I want to try anyway, look from countless talented students over her 20 years of teaching. She didn't argue. She just told me to grab Dragon Tiger Technique from the school's technique library, train both to the intermediate level, and attempt the fusion. When I failed, I'd understand the bottleneck myself. Then she moved on to her actual professional recommendations. 3 paths she thought suited me better. She projected 3 technique files into the air. The first was Crimson Sun Prison Suppression Technique, an A-rank technique and her own specialty. It simulated a star's core, producing pure yang spiritual energy with devastating firepower. She demonstrated by igniting a small golden red flame on her fingertip that warped the air with its heat. As a 10-star transcendent warrior, she could project her spiritual energy outward as real fire. She said this path would give me combat power the fastest, and if I chose it, she'd throw in the full online course package plus 5 hours of one-on-one guidance for free. Lin Yuechan then showed me her second recommendation, Formless Tribulation Heart Sutra, an A-rank technique that attacked enemies through spirit and willpower instead of physical force. It had no prerequisite techniques, but the catch was brutal. In 500 years at this branch campus, fewer than 100 people had ever managed to learn it. She recommended it because she thought my perfection-level calisthenics proved I had exceptional mental perception. She also mentioned that warriors who mastered this technique had a huge advantage when applying to become exploration team captains, almost never rejected. That detail grabbed my attention, but I knew the truth. My incredible talent wasn't real comprehension ability, it was entirely my system doing the work. My actual learning speed was ordinary. 8 treasures technique alone took me 2 full months just to get started. A technique that fewer than 100 people learned in 5 centuries? I might spend 500 years and never figure it out. Her third option was the Celestial Star Body, an A-rank body forging technique that drew power from cosmic starlight radiation instead of expensive materials. Cheap to practice, well-rounded, but slower and less flashy than the other 2. She said its biggest weakness was that it demanded high comprehension, which she thought wasn't a problem for me. I was stuck. All 3 of her recommendations required genuine talent to learn, which I didn't have. What I needed was something easy to pick up. My system leveled things up through repetition, not insight. So I asked her a strange question. Were there any techniques that were easy to learn but hard to master? She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. She launched into a stern lecture about how martial arts required patience and willpower, and that choosing the easy path would create terrible habits. She warned me my amazing talent would become my biggest obstacle if my mental discipline couldn't keep up. I made up an excuse. I told her I had some kind of psychological issue where I'd get unbearably anxious and frustrated if I couldn't break through quickly, like ants crawling inside my head. Better to pick something I could learn fast and stay motivated than waste time stuck at the starting line. She clearly thought this was bizarre. A genius with the mental toughness of wet paper? But she rationalized it as a quirk of my rough upbringing. No proper mentors, no structured training, just raw survival instinct. She sighed internally and decided to respect my choice. She started searching through the technique database, muttering to herself as she rejected one option after another. Too low a ceiling. Pure technique with no spiritual cultivation. Requires special bloodline. She told me she'd never met anyone who specifically wanted the flattest, easiest road in martial arts. I just smiled awkwardly. Then, right when she was about to give up and try talking me out of it again, her finger stopped. Something caught her eye on the screen, a plain, slightly yellowed file. Lin Yuechon found it. A technique called Primordial Unity Technique, a B-rank technique that used to be A rank before getting downgraded. She explained that its core idea was the simplest in the entire empire: accumulate. No fancy elemental transformations, no complex moves. Just absorb spiritual energy from the environment, convert it into pure, primordial energy, and keep compressing and refining it endlessly. Because it accepted any type of energy without restriction, the entry barrier was absurdly low. Any normal quasi-warrior could learn it within 3 days. That was exactly what I needed. The hard part? Since the energy had no elemental attribute, it was plain and weak compared to someone throwing fire or ice at the same level. To make it powerful, you either had to stockpile vastly more energy than your peers, a slow, grinding approach, or reach an incredibly advanced level and somehow awaken your own unique attribute within that pure energy. Almost nobody ever achieved that second step. That's why the technique had been abandoned by the modern era, sitting forgotten in the archives like a fossil from the pioneering age. But none of those downsides applied to me. My system didn't care about comprehension barriers or attribute awakening. It just needed repetition to level things up. If I could push this technique to perfection, who knows what would happen? I told her immediately, this is the one. She confirmed my choice, sighed with a mix of regret and curiosity, then helped me acquire it through a school program called Ancient Text Research Support. I paid a 100,000 credit deposit, and the complete technique with official notes and copyright certification transferred to my terminal. She also mentioned I could submit cultivation insights for credits and rewards later, which caught my attention. That ancient text program might be a gold mine. She ended the session there. I thanked her sincerely and headed back to my dorm. Mushi was waiting up for me on the sofa, pretending to read, but clearly worried. I showed her what I'd chosen. She saw the B rank label and all the notes about mediocre power and unclear potential, but didn't question me for a second. She just looked into my eyes and said, "You chose it for a reason. I trust you." That simple sentence meant more than anything. After she went to bed, I opened the full technique and started studying. 3 hours later, I'd done it. I'd learned the basics. My system showed Primordial Unity Technique at entry level, though still locked. My stats had ticked up slightly too, physical and mental both at 103, spiritual energy at 53. Looking at that, unlocked, tag sitting there, I already knew what I wanted to do next. Maybe tomorrow I'd go make another donation to unlock it. The next morning, Mushi woke up to find me already practicing the Primordial Unity Technique on the living room floor. I'd been at it all night without sleeping, and I felt completely refreshed, better than a full night's rest. That was the technique's hidden perk. It replaced sleep entirely, letting me train around the clock. Mushi was impressed. I told her I'd also help her train once I got 8 treasures to perfection level, but she insisted I focus on myself during this critical time. I told her teaching my wife was only natural. She got emotional, hugged me tight, then kissed me before running off to the bathroom, face bright red. At breakfast with the Bai family, they asked about last night's tutoring session. I told them a carefully edited version. Lin Yuechon had analyzed my situation, explained that 8 treasures led to the body forging path, which was powerful but insanely expensive, and that I wanted to try it anyway using my comprehension ability. For my main technique, I'd picked Primordial Unity Technique to build a broad foundation, plus I had 3 A-rank backup options. Mujia got excited when he heard the technique had 0 entry difficulty and wanted to learn it too, until his dad smacked him on the head and told him to stop being ridiculous. When I mentioned the technique's main feature was letting you train 24 hours without sleep, Mujia's excitement instantly died. No sleep ever? What's the point of living? Everyone laughed. After breakfast, we walked outside and ran straight into trouble. A group of people was heading toward us, all giving off that confident, privileged energy of martial arts elite families. I recognized them immediately, the genius class members from the provincial exam. Lei Qianjun and Su Qingying were at the center, being congratulated for getting into Galaxy and Longten respectively. The others were heading to Golden Bowl. And right there among them was Yin Feilong, his face dark and brooding. The moment his eyes landed on me walking out of the restaurant, his expression turned even uglier. I walked right past Yin Feilong and his group without even glancing their way. Behind me, I could feel the tension, but I didn't care. One of his companions nudged him, asking who I was, but Yin Feilong stayed quiet, smart enough to know that saying anything would only embarrass himself further. I heard Su Qingying ask Lei Qianjun about me. He dismissed me with one sentence, just a lucky nobody with shallow foundations who wouldn't get far. All the genius class kids instantly looked at me with casual contempt, as if his word was final. After we'd walked a good distance, Mushi tugged my sleeve and asked if I was okay. I just laughed and told her it was nothing, just a guy I'd already beaten. My father-in-law overheard and clapped me on the shoulder, telling me that the martial path was all about competition and encountering rivals meant I was climbing upward. Mujia, once he figured out I was the one who'd knocked out the famous Yin Feilong, practically exploded with excitement. He'd heard the genius class hyping Yin Feilong as a guaranteed top candidate before the exam, and my brother-in-law just punched him out. He's the real deal. After that, Mushi went with her family to explore the city center, their last day before heading back to Haicheng tomorrow. I had my own business to handle. I needed to make another donation at the fertility center to unlock Primordial Unity Technique in my system. I followed the map to the Imperial Birth Management Center on the edge of Scholars Forest. But the moment I reached the building entrance, I got swarmed by a crowd of pushy middlemen and brokers. They were shoving business cards into my hands, pitching private channels for selling reproductive material at higher prices than the official route, offering to beautify my genetic potential ratings to get better matches, connecting donors directly with wealthy families wanting children. One lady with curly hair was practically shouting about fair prices and great service. A guy in gold-rimmed glasses whispered about skipping the long official queue for much better pay. I stood there stunned, hands full of glowing electronic business cards I never asked for. I tossed all those brokers' business cards straight into the trash. Too risky, and I didn't care about the money anyway. I just needed the official channel for safety and speed. I walked in, filled out my forms, did my thing, and headed back to campus feeling refreshed. The moment I stepped into the dormitory building, the system notifications started firing off one after another. 3 successful conceptions this time. Maybe becoming a warrior enhanced things in that department too. The first unlock went to Primordial Unity Technique, and since I had no other lock techniques, the other 2 gave me something new, permission points. Each point could instantly unlock any technique I'd already learned to the entry level on my own. I immediately thought about Dragon Tiger Technique. If I could learn it, unlock it with a point, then grind both it and 8 treasures to perfection and fuse them. But I stopped myself. One thing at a time. Primordial Unity came first. Back in the empty dorm, I sat down and started grinding. The technique was incredibly smooth to practice, absorbing ambient spiritual energy, converting it to pure attributeless primordial energy, storing it in my core. Every 10 minutes earned 1 progress point. I completely lost track of time. When I finally hit level 2, the upgrade was more than just a numbers increase. The energy inside me became denser and more refined, and my understanding of the technique jumped to an entirely new level. Details that had been blurry suddenly made perfect sense. Each level wasn't just accumulation, it was a real qualitative leap. I opened my eyes to find it was already dawn. I'd been cultivating straight through the night without noticing. Mushi had come home the previous afternoon, but hadn't disturbed me. She'd kept dinner warm and was waiting with that gentle smile of hers. Over breakfast, I checked my terminal and found an official announcement from the university. There would be an entrance assessment exam on October 1st, the first day of school. The rewards caught my eye immediately. Top 1,000 gets 100 study credits. Top 100 gets access to the A-Rank Technique Library. And top 10 gets a special body refining elixir from the school's alchemy department. I had just over 20 days until then. With my system and the primordial unity techniques around-the-clock training, that was more than enough time to climb significantly. The grind was on. 5 days of non-stop grinding. No sleep, just pure cultivation. My primordial unity technique hit level 4, and the results were staggering. The moment it broke through, something clicked in my mind like a flash of lightning. I raised my index finger, guided a thread of primordial energy to the tip, and a small orange flame flickered to life. Real fire. On my fingertip. I couldn't help but grin. Lin Yuechan had told me that giving this formless energy an elemental attribute was the hardest step, something most practitioners never achieve in their entire lives. Harder than reaching heaven, she'd said. I did it in 5 days. At level 4, I wondered what face she'd make if she found out. When I checked my system panel, I was genuinely shocked. My gene potential had jumped to 12.1%. Physical and mental stats were both at 115, and my spiritual energy had exploded past 100, nearly doubling from where it started. 5 days with one technique had transformed me more than everything before it combined. The choice was obvious now. 8 treasures and Dragon Tiger would have to wait. Primordial unity was my priority. The returns were too insane to ignore. I wanted to test my new abilities properly, so I tried booking the public training hall. The reservation screen was almost entirely red, booked solid. The earliest slot was 7 days out, and I barely managed to grab it. Then I started thinking about the entrance exam. There would almost certainly be combat. I had power now, and I could even produce fire, but I didn't have any actual fighting techniques. During the recruitment exam, I'd mostly taken hits and scraped by with brute force and tricks. I needed real combat skills. I messaged Lin Yuechan asking about martial techniques. She replied an hour later with 2 options: an online video course covering 12 basic Imperial combat techniques for cheap, or another in-person session where she'd analyze my fighting style and design a personalized technique combination, 10,000 credits per hour. I didn't hesitate. The online course was generic. What I needed was her expert eye picking something tailored specifically for me. Last time she'd found me primordial unity, which turned out to be the perfect match. Maybe she could do the same thing again. Find me a combat technique that was easy to learn, hard to master, with a sky-high ceiling. I messaged back immediately. When are you free? Lin Yuechan's schedule was packed. The earliest she could fit me in was 2 days later, midnight to 1 a.m. I took it without hesitation. After 5 days of non-stop cultivation, I was starving. When I told Mushi I was hungry, she smiled and brought out half a roasted whole cow on a massive metal tray. Golden, crispy, dripping with juices. I demolished it completely, down to the bones. When she asked if I was full, I sheepishly admitted I wasn't quite there yet. She laughed and brought out the other half. She'd bought an entire cow knowing I'd need it. I cleaned that off too. Since starting Primordial Unity, my body had become a bottomless pit for energy and food. Mushi was already calculating that she'd need another trip to the market. Feeding a rapidly growing warrior husband was a sweet but serious job. We went to the campus market together to buy more food. There, I spotted some familiar faces, Qin Xiaoxiao and Lu Jinlong, the real top talents from the provincial exam who'd led the Tiantai first high team that crushed everyone in the second stage. They'd gotten into Galaxy too, so we'd be classmates now. I glanced at them and looked away. I didn't know them and had no interest in sucking up to anyone. They noticed me too, but couldn't quite place me. The tall guy in their group figured I was probably some bottom-tier dark horse from a small city, not even worth remembering. The girl named Chu Yu agreed dismissively, complaining about how the school let in a few commoners every year who just ended up crumbling under pressure, selling themselves for resources, having mental breakdowns, even jumping off buildings. They watched me and Mushi picking out a whole mutant cow at a stall and mocked me further. The tall guy laughed that I was still eating primitive food, which meant my gene potential was barely above 10%, still at the stage where food could fuel me. He said once you passed 11%, food couldn't keep up with energy demands, and you needed expensive nutrient solutions. And someone from the bottom could never afford those for long. In their minds, my future was already decided, destined to wash out of this elite school. They had no idea how wrong they were. I had no idea those Tianai kids were talking about me behind my back. I was too busy picking out a whole mutant cow with Mushi at the market. The butcher, a friendly middle-aged guy who'd been selling meat there for 40 years, gave me a sales pitch about nutrient solutions and handed me a free 10 milliliters sample bottle. He said that tiny amount was equivalent to 10 pounds of beef. He could tell from how we looked that we were from humble backgrounds and figured I'd need his product soon enough. I thanked him and took it. Then Mushi and I dragged our massive cow home. 2 days later, my primordial unity technique hit level 5. Gene potential climbed to 13.1%. Physical and mental stats both at 122, spiritual energy at 111. My fingertip flame burned hotter than before. The growth rate was like riding a rocket. My appetite had become insane. Mushi was rotating between whole roasted cows and whole roasted sheep to keep me fed. She asked if I should switch to nutrient solutions like everyone said you had to after 10% gene potential, but honestly, regular food still worked perfectly fine for me. I could eat a whole cow and feel completely replenished, warm, energized, no problems. Whether it was the primordial unity technique, the perfection level radio calisthenics remaking my body, or just my own strange constitution, I had no idea. I didn't overthink things I couldn't explain. The butcher was baffled too. He'd never seen a new student eat like this for days straight without wrecking their stomach. He figured I must have practiced some weird digestive technique to save money on nutrient solutions. He couldn't have been more wrong. That night, I headed to my midnight appointment with Lin Yuechan. The campus was still buzzing even at this hour. New students everywhere, coming from training halls or rushing to classes. The cultivation atmosphere here was something else. I knocked on room 2202 and walked in. But Lin Yuechan wasn't alone. Standing there with her back to me was a tall girl with short hair in a dark red combat suit. When she turned around, I recognized her immediately. It was Qin Xiaoxiao, the powerhouse who dominated the provincial exam with her Tiantai first high team. Qin Xiaoxiao was already in the training room when I arrived. She glanced at me with a flicker of surprise, but when Lin Yuechan asked if we knew each other, she just said, no, and left without a second look. I didn't care. Once we were alone, Lin Yuechan studied me and looked impressed. She assumed I'd taken her advice and started practicing the blazing sun chi technique, since she could sense fire element energy inside me. She even guessed my gene potential was around 12 to 13% and suggested I join her class after school started, which would basically make me her disciple. Then she asked me to demonstrate the technique so she could pick matching combat skills. That's when things got awkward. I told her it wasn't blazing sun, it was primordial unity technique. She froze. If it was primordial unity, then the fire energy inside me meant I'd already reached the awakening stage. The step she'd said was harder than reaching heaven, the barrier that stopped almost everyone for their entire lives. I'd done it in less than a week. She stared at me like I was some kind of monster and asked me to demonstrate. I performed the level 4 technique, deliberately holding back a little so I wouldn't shock her too much. Even so, her eyes kept getting wider. When I finished, she muttered, freak. Absolute freak, under her breath. But then her rational side kicked in. Yes, I had incredible affinity with this technique, but talent alone wasn't everything in the modern era. Resources mattered even more. And she still believed I had a fundamental weakness, my insistence on easy-to-learn techniques, which she saw as a sign of weak willpower. She figured I'd hit a wall eventually, especially at the martial intent stage of combat techniques, where pure determination mattered most. She let it go and moved on to business. Any combat technique experience? She asked. I shook my head. Nothing. 0. She sighed. My high school hadn't even taught basic martial arts fundamentals. But she said being a blank slate was actually better than having bad habits to fix. Then she started teaching me the foundations. All weapons, swords, spears, staffs, were just extensions of your fists, she explained. Every slash and thrust was a variation of a punch. and footwork was the root of all power. Without solid fist techniques and footwork, everything else crumbled. She'd barely finished speaking before she moved. Lin Yuechan demonstrated the basic fist technique and basic footwork for me, the Empire's official foundational combat skills that 99% of all warriors start with. Her movements were effortless and fluid, every punch and step perfectly refined. She told me these were far more important than radio calisthenics, and that most warriors trained both to mastery level before branching into specialized combat styles. She performed it twice, then told me to try. 1 hour later, her face said it all. Pure disappointment. My punches were limp, my footwork was a mess. I couldn't even find the right way to generate force. She told me bluntly that my combat technique talent was possibly the worst she'd ever seen, and suggested I might be better off becoming a theoretical martial arts scholar instead. She compared me to Qin Xiaoxiao, who'd been learning an A-rank blade technique from her. In 1 hour, Qin Xiaoxiao had already gotten the basic form down. I couldn't even stand properly doing the simplest punches. I didn't argue. She wasn't wrong about how I looked right now. But inside, I was thinking, just wait until I get these two techniques into my system and start grinding. Then we'll see who's slow. She calmed down and told me the training room had automatically recorded her demonstration. Within 24 hours, a VR teaching video would be generated that I could buy and study from. But then she mentioned something that really caught my attention. The official teaching videos for basic fist and basic footwork were recorded by war god Ling Zhan, one of the original pioneers of the entire Taurus constellation. Not a planetary pioneer, like the ones who settled our star system, but a true first-generation explorer who carved out humanity's foothold in this entire region of the galaxy with nothing but primitive ships and raw strength. A living legend carved into the highest peak of history. She explained that even though the video was ancient and grainy, war god Ling Zhan's martial intent was embedded in it. If someone with high enough perception watched it, they might catch a trace of that godlike willpower. She said the current top-ranked warrior student at Galaxy had done exactly that, absorbing a sliver of the war god's intent and becoming unbeatable among peers. Then she caught herself, looking at me stumbling through basic punches an hour ago. She probably figured telling me about martial intent was like showing a toddler the top of a mountain. But I filed that information away carefully. My system didn't care about talent, it cared about repetition. If I could get these basics into my system and grind them to high levels, maybe the war god's intent wouldn't be so unreachable after all. Lin Yuechan reminded me that her demonstration contained her own martial intent, which was easier for beginners to pick up than the war gods. She warned me to avoid all those clickbait courses online promising to teach techniques in a day, pure garbage. She suggested I start with her VR teaching video, which would suit my current level best. Walking out, I felt a bit foolish. I'd spent 10,000 credits and basically just learned that I needed to practice the most basic punches and footwork. But then I realized the real value was the information about war god Ling Zhan, about martial intent, about how the whole system worked. That knowledge alone was worth the money. Back home, I told Mushi everything. She was surprised that even Galaxy University followed the same path as her lower-tier school. Basic fist and footwork first, then specialize. When I mentioned the war god's martial intent, she said her teachers had never even brought it up, probably because students at her level couldn't do anything with that information anyway. For the next 5 days, I ground through Lin Yuechan's VR video non-stop, breaking down every movement, every force angle, practicing over and over. It was brutal. My body could skip sleep thanks to primordial unity, but learning combat techniques drained me mentally in a way cultivation never did. Finally, after 5 grueling days, I managed to stumble through both basic fist technique and basic footwork from start to finish. Still clumsy, still weak, but complete enough to count. I checked my system. Both showed as entry level, unlock status pending. The moment I confirmed it, 5 days of mental exhaustion crashed into me all at once. Even primordial unity couldn't fight the spiritual fatigue. I barely made it to the bed before passing out cold. When I woke up to daylight, I didn't waste a single second. I opened the system and used both my permission points. Unlock basic fist technique. Unlock basic footwork. 2 doors blew open in my mind. Everything clicked. Force generation, step variations, strike mechanics. All of it became instinct, like I'd known it my whole life. Both techniques started at level 1 with only 10 progress points needed per level, same as radio calisthenics. 10 levels to perfection. The grind was about to begin for real. I tried watching the War God's Ancient video first, but after 2 days of staring at that blurry footage, I got absolutely nothing from it. No martial intent, no enlightenment, just a headache. So I switched to Lin Yuechan's VR video, which was 100 times clearer and easier to learn from. That's how I managed to reach entry level in 3 days. After unlocking both techniques with my permission points, I jumped out of bed and started grinding basic fist technique immediately. I didn't need to think about form or force anymore. The system handled comprehension. I just had to complete each full routine to count as one practice. I blurred through them as fast as possible. 1 hour, level 2. Each upgrade felt like an explosion in my mind. A perfect little version of me appeared in my head, demonstrating every move flawlessly. Techniques I'd been confused about suddenly made complete sense. 5 hours, level 4. My body was physically transforming with each level. Muscles tighter, bones denser, force transmission smoother. My gene potential climbed to 13.4%, physical and mental both at 127. I was surprised to find that combat techniques also boosted gene potential. I'd assumed only cultivation methods did that. Mushi watched me the whole time, quietly amazed. She couldn't understand how I'd gone from barely standing to visibly improving with every set. She thought it was pure genius. If only she knew it was just my system doing the heavy lifting. When I finally stopped, the hunger hit me like a truck, worse than ever. I devoured an entire roasted sheep, but still felt empty. I drank the sample nutrient solution the butcher had given me, gone instantly, like a raindrop in a desert. Mushi was worried and suggested buying proper nutrient solutions, but I told her I was fine, just needed more food. Punching burned way more energy than internal cultivation. We headed out to buy more food, and right then, the door next to ours opened at the same moment. Out walked a chubby guy our age with a friendly face and shrewd little eyes. He looked at me, then at Mushi, and his eyes went wide with obvious envy. He gave me a thumbs up. Bro, nice connections. You actually managed to bring your maid in here. Both Mushi and I froze when the chubby guy called her my maid. I glanced at Mushi, the woman who cooked whole cows and sheep for me every day, kept the apartment running, and took care of everything while I trained. Okay, I could almost see where he got confused, but only for a split second. Mushi turned bright red and hid behind me. I cleared my throat and told him she was my wife. His jaw dropped. He instantly did the math. Young married couple at a top university could only mean one thing in his mind: elite political alliance between powerful families. His whole attitude flipped from casual to deeply respectful in about 2 seconds. Sister-in-law? My deepest apologies. He bowed and scraped, then introduced himself as Qian Kun, whose family ran the provincial distribution for a major nutrient solution brand. He offered me cost-price products, friendship, and basically anything I wanted. I just shook his hand and exchanged contacts. The guy had completely misread my background, but I wasn't about to correct him. On the way to the elevator, we passed a cold-looking girl in black combat gear coming from the opposite direction. She glanced at us with obvious disgust and walked right past without a word. Qian Kun told me she was our other neighbor, a Tela local who looked down on anyone from outside the capital. He was clearly annoyed by her attitude, but then quickly added that I was obviously different, probably some hidden elite, slumming it, on the 298th floor. I didn't bother explaining the truth. After Qian Kun left for the training hall, Mushi whispered that he seemed overly friendly. I agreed. He was sharp, came from money, and was clearly the type who networked aggressively. His family had probably taught him to make friends everywhere and enemies nowhere. As long as he meant no harm, it was fine. Meanwhile, I knew Qian Kun was puzzling over me too. Young, married, no visible family backing. I didn't fit any category he understood. He probably settled on mysterious hidden heir, keeping a low profile. Whatever kept him friendly. Mushi and I went shopping and came back with 3 whole mutant cows and sheep. We rushed to catch an elevator just as one was closing. The doors opened, and the person already standing inside turned to face me. It was Su Qingying. Su Qingying barely acknowledged us in the elevator. She glanced at the 298th floor button I pressed, and I could practically feel her contempt. In her mind, 298 meant weak, and being married at this age meant not focused on training. She got off at floor 275 without a word. After she left, Mushi quietly confirmed it was the Ice Mountain Goddess from Haicheng First High. I could sense a tiny hint of jealousy from her, so I pulled her close and whispered that every so-called goddess out there was just someone I'd eventually surpass. My only goddess was her. She blushed furiously, and I kissed her right there in the elevator. When the doors opened at our floor, her legs were still wobbly. She scolded me about the security cameras in a voice so quiet I could barely hear it. While Mushi cooked, I tried watching the War Gods video again with my level 4 understanding. An hour later, nothing. Complete blank. Still couldn't sense any martial intent. Maybe level 4 was too low, or maybe I needed my footwork to match my fist level. Either way, the answer was the same: grind higher first. I ate a whole roasted cow, finally felt full again, then dove back into training. I alternated between fist and footwork, grinding both simultaneously. My movements were getting noticeably smoother and more coordinated with each level. Mushi started practicing her own 8 treasures technique alongside me, quietly working toward her own breakthrough. 5 days later, both hit level 10, maximum. Perfection. My bones crackled as I stood still after the final upgrade. The transformation was dramatic. Gene potential at 14.9%, physical and mental stats both past 140, spiritual energy at 120. In my mind, the little training figure now moved with absolute perfection. Fist and footwork merged into one seamless whole, no separation between them. My entire presence had changed. I felt like a rough stone that had finally been sharpened into something with real edge. Before testing my strength, I opened the War Gods video one more time. And this time, when War God Lingzhan appeared on screen, something was different. The world I was seeing through his movements wasn't the same as before. When I opened the War Gods video this time, everything looked different. With both basic techniques at perfection level, I could finally read the essence of his movements. And behind every simple punch and step, I sensed something vast, an immeasurable force, like glimpsing a colossal mountain through endless fog from 1,000 miles away. I knew it was real. I could feel its crushing weight. But I was impossibly far from even reaching its base, let alone climbing it. I had no idea which direction to even start walking. I threw everything I had into it. All my focus, all my spiritual power, trying to absorb even the tiniest trace. I imagined myself as the war god, each strike carrying the power to crush galaxies. But his martial intent was too pure, too overwhelming. My mind was like a teacup trying to hold an ocean. 10 minutes in, my body jolted like I'd been struck by lightning. My face went white, cold sweat covered my forehead, and my vision doubled. My spirit was dangerously drained. I immediately sat down and ran Primordial Unity to recover, and the splitting headache slowly faded. But when I checked my system, something new had appeared at the bottom of my technique list. Martial intent? Not yet learned. The name was nothing but question marks, but the entry existed. That meant this path was real and achievable, just not at my current level. The War Gods Mountain was too high. I couldn't even see the base, so I needed a smaller hill to start with. Lin Yuechan. She'd said her own martial intent was a firefly compared to the War Gods moon. But that was exactly the point. A firefly was something I could actually reach and touch. I opened her VR video. With my perfected basics, I could now see through every detail of her movements, the force trajectories, the footwork mechanics. And this time, I felt it. Every punch she threw carried a blazing, aggressive energy, as if the air itself could ignite. It was a will of explosive destruction, fierce, direct, and within my grasp. If the War God's intent was an unfathomable universe, Lin Yuechan's was a volcano about to erupt. The universe left me lost and overwhelmed, but the volcano, I could feel its heat, understand its fury. I carefully extended my spiritual senses toward it. No crushing pressure this time. My mind touched that burning will like a needle finding its mark. A flood of scorching information rushed into my brain. I saw a raging fire exploding through darkness, destroying everything in its path with unstoppable speed. Fast, precise, ruthless, explosive, devastating. That was the core of Lin Yuechan's martial intent. I absorbed it greedily. Inside my mental world, the little figure practicing my techniques began to change. Its movements were no longer just technically perfect. Now they carried a trace of aggressive fire, a wild burning ferocity that hadn't been there before. After an hour of absorbing Lin Yuechan's VR video, I came out drenched in sweat but thrilled. My system had updated. The martial intent entry changed from martial intent to martial intent blazing swiftness, not yet learned. That was huge progress. Before, I didn't even know what I was looking for. Now I had a clear target. Then a wild idea hit me. What if Lin Yuechan's martial intent only seemed weak because it was at a low level? If I could get it into my system and grind it to level 10, to perfection, would it still be just a firefly? Or would it become something equal to the war gods, Bright Moon? If that was true, I'd found an insane shortcut. Instead of trying to climb an impossible mountain, I could start from a small hill and grind my way to the same peak. But I'd already used both my permission points on the basic combat techniques. I needed more, which meant another trip to the fertility center. When I told Mushi I was heading there, her face turned red immediately. She tried to talk me out of it, worrying that a warrior's genetic material was sensitive information that could be exploited. I reassured her the official channel was safe. Then she misunderstood my reason entirely. She thought I was either going for the small subsidy money or that I just had needs. She got even redder and quietly said the doctor had cleared her for intimacy now that she was almost 5 months along, and started pulling me toward the bedroom. I had to stop her, feeling both amused and guilty. I told her I was worried about hurting the babies. She looked a little disappointed, and seeing that expression made my heart ache. I knew I couldn't hide these fertility center visits forever. So I sat her down, held her close, and told her the partial truth in a half-joking way. I just want to have as many children as possible. I want my bloodline spread across the entire star system. She stared at me, remembering I'd said something similar when we first met. Back then it sounded like a silly fantasy. Now, coming from a man whose power was growing at a terrifying rate, it felt completely different. She finally let go of my hand and quietly said, "Okay, go." I kissed her forehead and left. What I didn't know was that after the door closed, Mushi sat alone on the sofa, face burning, wrestling with an incredibly conflicted thought, one she almost said out loud, whether she should offer to find me another woman. I headed back to the fertility center for another donation. Same pushy brokers outside, same smooth official process inside. But on my way out, a staff member stopped me with an interesting offer, an invitation to a reproductive charity gala in 2 days at the Starver Tower. At first I didn't care. Some fancy party had nothing to do with me. But then she explained the details, and my ears perked up immediately. The gala featured families and individuals seeking high-quality warrior genetic material through open bidding, meaning the buyers themselves had strong bloodlines too. Strong genes plus strong genes meant better offspring, which was perfect for my system. Even better, the gala would also showcase rare dual cultivation techniques and special materials for boosting descendant potential. Those two things hit exactly what I needed most. I accepted the invitation without hesitation. On the way back, my system pinged twice. 2 more successful conceptions, giving me 2 permission points. Exactly what I needed for the martial intent unlock. I couldn't even wait to get back to the dorm. Right there on the hover train, I put on my VR headset and dove into Lin Yuechan's teaching video. I focused everything I had on sensing and imitating her, blazing swiftness, martial intent. Deep in my mental world, a tiny flame had started to burn, small and flickering, but real. It was trying to grow, trying to match the volcanic fury of her will. The city blurred past the train windows, but I was somewhere else entirely, lost in my own world of fire and willpower. Meanwhile, back at the dorm, Mushi was going through her own inner struggle. She understood the Empire's laws. Warriors could have multiple partners, and as my power grew, the rules that bound ordinary people wouldn't apply to me anymore. She wrestled with the thought of offering to find me another woman, hating herself for even considering it. She'd once dreamed of being a strong, independent warrior woman, but reality had made her the one standing behind a genius, watching his light grow brighter while feeling her own ordinariness more sharply. In the end, she shook off those thoughts. All she could do was take care of me, protect the babies, keep training, and try not to fall too far behind. She got up, walked to the kitchen, and started cooking, making sure hot food would be ready when I came home. Back at the dorm, I ate everything Mushi had prepared, then went straight into mental training. No VR this time, just me, sitting still, replaying that blazing swiftness, intent over and over in my mind. My spiritual fire kept trying to replicate that explosive burst I'd felt from Lin Yuechan's will. Fail, reset, try again. Countless times. Then it happened. After one final attempt, something shattered in my mind like breaking glass. The little figure in my head that practiced my techniques completely transformed. Its punches now carried a burning, aggressive force, every strike wrapped in roaring flame. It wasn't just perfect form anymore. It had intent. I checked my system. Martial intent, blazing swiftness, learned, locked, dot. I used one permission point immediately to unlock it. The moment it unlocked, a surge of blazing willpower erupted from deep inside me and fused with my entire being, spirit, blood, every cell. I didn't even need to consciously activate it anymore. My natural movements just carried that fierce, burning edge. The progress bar showed level 1 needing 1,000 points, 10 times more than Primordial Unity's starting requirement. This thing was on a completely different tier. Even better, my gene potential had jumped a full percent to 15.9% just from the unlocking process. My senses felt sharper, my mental state subtly elevated. When I told Mushi I'd learned it, she lit up with genuine pride and called me a genius. I pulled her into my arms and kissed her. All the worry she'd been carrying about the gap between us seemed to melt away in that moment. Afterward, she broke free with renewed determination, saying she needed to train too and couldn't let me leave her too far behind. Her fighting spirit was adorable. I spent the rest of the afternoon experimenting with how to level up the martial intent. Just meditating on it did nothing. The progress bar stayed still. But when I practiced basic fist technique while naturally channeling the intent, it ticked up by 1. When I ran Primordial Unity technique, it ticked up again while also counting toward that technique's progress. After hours of testing, I figured out the incredible truth. Martial intent worked like a passive skill. Any time I trained, whether combat techniques or cultivation methods, as long as the blazing intent naturally flowed through my practice, it gained progress alongside whatever else I was doing. It leveled up automatically while I trained everything else. No extra time needed. That was an absolute game changer. The martial intent working as a passive skill was incredible. Every time I practiced any technique, fist, footwork, primordial unity, anything, the blazing swiftness intent leveled up alongside it automatically. Buy one, get one free. Since basic fist and basic footwork were already maxed out, repeating them just for tiny intent progress would be wasteful. I had 2 paths forward: learn advanced combat techniques, or max out my remaining cultivation methods. I decided to grind 8 treasures technique first. There was a personal reason too. Mushi had been stuck at the bottleneck between mastery and the next level for 2 whole years. Once I pushed 8 treasures to perfection, I could teach her properly and help her break through. When I told her I was going back to practice 8 treasures so I could tutor her later, she gave me a look like I'd lost my mind. She'd been stuck at that wall for years, and my current level in 8 treasures was clearly below hers. How could I possibly teach her? But she humored me with a smile instead of arguing. I also told her about the fertility charity gala I'd been invited to in 2 days. She read the invitation carefully, official government seal, attendee-only admission. Then she looked at me with the strangest expression. So, the government is basically promoting you as their model stud? I nearly choked. She burst out laughing and said she definitely didn't want to come. Too embarrassing. I told her to stop laughing, but she couldn't control herself, doubled over and gasping for air. That did it. I scooped her up in my arms without warning. She yelped and grabbed my neck, face turning red as she realized what I had in mind. Not now. It's daytime, she protested weakly, her voice soft as cotton candy. I wasn't listening. I carried her straight into the bedroom and kicked the door shut behind us. After some quality time with Mushi, I got back to grinding 8 treasures while she practiced alongside me, determined not to fall behind. 2 days later, I headed to the charity gala at the Star River Tower. The top-floor venue was pure luxury, classical music, fancy servers, and guests who were clearly wealthy or powerful. Some had warrior auras I couldn't even begin to read. I stuck out in my plain university combat uniform, but I didn't care. I found a quiet corner and started eating from the buffet. The event kicked off with a grand speech about Imperial Bloodline Revival. preserving and strengthening warrior genetics for the empire's future. Then they got to the real business, families publicly bidding for high-quality warrior genetic material. The first family up was the Zhou clan, a mining business worth over 100 million credits, but they hadn't produced a single real warrior in 3 generations. They were offering 500,000 credits for genetic material from anyone with at least 12% gene potential. The crowd of warriors around me barely reacted. Intella, 500,000 was apparently pocket change. But for me, that was serious money, almost as much as everything Mushi's family had given me combined. And I'd be getting paid for something my system needed me to do anyway. Absolute win. Several more families followed with similar stories. Once great clans whose warrior bloodlines had dried up, sitting on piles of money, but desperately needing strong genes for their next generation. Their women were typically in their 30s or 40s, had missed prime childbearing years, and were too proud to settle for average warriors, while elite warriors wanted nothing to do with declining families. They'd ended up here as a last resort. I signed up for every single one. More children meant more system progress, and getting paid for it was just a bonus. Then someone unexpected took the stage. A tall young woman in a dark blue combat suit walked up with cold confidence. Short hair, sharp features, unmistakable arrogance. It was Yi Qinghan, my neighbor from the dorm, the one who looked at us like garbage in the hallway. She introduced herself as a representative of Xinke Biotech Group. At almost the same moment, her eyes swept the room and landed on me in my corner. Her brow twitched with instant disgust before she looked away. I could practically read her thoughts. The lowlife from next door was here, selling his genetic material. She probably felt contaminated just being in the same room. My neighbor Yi Qinghan took the stage representing Xinke Biotech Group. She announced they were seeking genetic material from warriors with at least 14% gene potential, but purely for scientific research. Drug development, combat suit design, gene modeling. Absolutely no reproduction. That killed my interest instantly. No babies meant no system progress. Completely useless to me. But the rest of the room loved it. Most young warriors didn't want their bloodline floating around in strangers' families, creating unknown children and potential drama. A clean 30 million credit deal with no strings attached? Perfect for them. Several more companies followed with identical terms. Top-tier pharmaceutical groups, weapons manufacturers, equipment designers. All wanted high-quality genetic samples for research only, paying around 200,000 to 300,000 credits each. The crowd got increasingly excited. I sat in my corner eating fancy snacks, completely bored. All this enthusiasm had nothing to do with me. The only offers that mattered were those first few declining families who actually wanted children, and I'd already signed up for all of them. After an hour, the genetic bidding wrapped up and the host announced the next segment, a charity auction. Every attending family and company had donated items to be sold, with proceeds going to the Imperial Birth Management Center to support genetically gifted but poor families. I figured it was basically a disguised entry fee, everyone showing off their wealth and status under the banner of charity. The first item was an old silver memory chip from the Zhou family. It contained a training video recorded 150 years ago by their founding patriarch, Zhou Tianheng, one of the original pioneers of our 0755 star system. He'd been a transcendent warrior, and the video showed him personally demonstrating his famous ocean torrent blade technique, complete with his martial intent, meant as a legacy for future generations. I thought it was basically the same concept as Lin Yuechan's VR recording, just made with ancient technology. Probably more of a collector's item than anything practical. But the room's reaction told me I was completely wrong about that. The auction started with that old memory chip containing the pioneer's blade technique video. Warriors around me were bidding eagerly, talking about how videos from original pioneers contained far more martial intent than modern VR tutorials, since those old masters didn't hold anything back. The chip sold for 110,000 credits, bought back by the Zhou family themselves, likely just to keep it from outsiders while completing their charity obligation. Then came the finale. The lights dimmed and 4 ancient characters appeared on screen. Xian Su Heart Sutra. The host couldn't even describe its cultivation details publicly. She just said, "Those who know, know," and told everyone to fill in the blanks themselves. Whatever it was, the description hit me right in the heart. It was exactly what I needed. The price, 1 million credits. with official interest-free installment plans of 3 to 10 years. $1 million was 10 times what I'd paid for Primordial Unity. I glanced at my balance, under 100,000. The excitement cooled fast, but I had 72 hours to decide, so I figured I'd discuss it with Mushi first. As I was leaving, a staff member stopped me. She said something unprecedented had happened. All 12 family bloodline projects I'd applied for had accepted me. Every single one. She'd never seen anyone get matched with all 12 before and needed to confirm I really wanted to go through with it. 12 projects meant 12 potential conception matches. 12 chances at permission points. This was infinitely more efficient than random trips to the fertility center. I said yes without blinking. All 12. Any order. She noted it down, impressed by my decisiveness. Then a voice called my name from behind. I turned to find the Zhou family patriarch, Zhou Wenyan, standing there with a warm smile and 2 daughters at his side. They looked about 35, elegantly dressed, clearly sisters. He shook my hand, introduced his daughters Zhou Linya and Zhou Linjing, then got straight to the point with zero hesitation. Mr. Lin, we've reviewed your profile. Would you be interested in becoming a son-in-law of the Zhou family? Before I could even process the Zhou family's marriage proposal, a second family rushed over. The Yu family patriarch, Yu Jinhai, barged in with his 32-year-old unmarried daughter Yu, making an equally direct pitch. Then I noticed more families lurking nearby, ready to jump in too. The 2 patriarchs started arguing over who had dibs on me. It was getting ridiculous. I raised my hand and stopped them. Thank you all, but I'm already married. The entire room went silent. Every eager smile froze. The daughters' eyes lost their sparkle instantly. Yu Jinhai recovered first, laughing it off and asking to exchange contacts as friends. Zhou Wenyan grudgingly did the same. The other families followed, and just like that, the dramatic husband-snatching scene ended. I left alone, declining all dinner invitations. What I didn't know was the drama happening in their cars afterward. Zhou Wenyan was scheming about how married people can get divorced, while his younger daughter threw a fit about refusing a second-hand husband from a backwater city. His older daughter wasn't much better. The old man sat there wondering why his family's bloodline had declined. The answer was staring him in the face. In the Yu family car, Yu Jinhai suggested his daughter befriend me and wait for an opportunity. She shot back that she had plenty of men chasing her and didn't need to chase a married man. He threatened to cut her allowance. She complained about his old-fashioned obsession with heirs. He just felt exhausted. And in Yi Qinghan's car, her assistant innocently brought up the funny scene of families fighting over a groom, mentioning he was a Galaxy University freshman. The temperature in the car dropped to freezing. Yi Qinghan's icy glare shut the assistant up mid-sentence. In Yi Qinghan's mind, I was disgusting. Someone who sold his genetic material for money had no right to attend Galaxy Martial Arts University. None of them knew who I really was, or what I was becoming. And honestly, I couldn't have cared less what any of them thought. On the train home, I texted Mushi that I was on my way. She had dinner waiting as always. Over the meal, she asked about the gala. I casually mentioned I'd picked up 12 projects. When she asked what kind, I told her each one paid around 500,000 credits. Her chopsticks clattered onto the table. She went completely still, eyes wide, doing the math in her head. 12 times 500,000, 6 million credits. She could barely speak. Not long ago, scraping together 500,000 from her family had felt like a miracle. Now I'd brought home 12 times that from a single evening. She jumped out of her chair and threw herself into my arms. I laughed and told her to calm down. 6 million was just the beginning. Then I mentioned the Xian Su Heart Sutra, a B-rank dual cultivation technique that reportedly boosted both partners' spiritual energy and improved offspring potential. Price, 1 million credits. Her jaw dropped again, but this time it wasn't about affordability. With 6 million coming in, 1 million was manageable. When the words, dual cultivation, fully registered, her face turned deep red. She poked at her rice and mumbled, just buy it then, without looking at me. I teased her about it, and she got flustered, insisting it was purely for the baby's gene potential and my training. Sure it was. After dinner, I messaged Lin Yuechan requesting another combat technique session. She responded with obvious skepticism. It had only been about 2 weeks since our last lesson. She warned me that rushing combat training without solid foundations was a waste of both our time. I told her I felt I'd made decent progress and wanted her guidance. Her reply practically dripped with disbelief, but she agreed. Tomorrow at midnight, room 2202. What I didn't know was that she'd just finished tutoring Qin Xiao, who was apparently performing exactly like a model student. Humble, diligent, steady progress. Everything Lin Yuechan thought a real talent should be. She'd already decided that if I showed up tomorrow with nothing to show for my training, she'd drop me as a student permanently. In her mind, overconfident fools weren't worth her time. I scheduled my 12 fertility projects to start as soon as possible. The center arranged the first one for the next morning at 10. The VIP area they took me to was completely different from the regular section, luxurious, private, with a calming fragrance in the air. Those family sponsorship fees clearly bought a different level of service. Afterward, walking back to campus, my system fired off 3 notifications in a row. 3 successful conceptions from 1 visit. Modern technology was something else. 3 more permission points in the bank. Then a message from Zhou Wenyan popped up, thanking me profusely. The hospital had confirmed a successful pregnancy with his family's genetic material. My mind briefly wandered to those Zhou sisters I'd met at the gala, but I shook those thoughts away fast. When you carry a sharp blade, the urge to cut arises on its own, I muttered to myself. Ancient wisdom wasn't wrong. Moments later, 500,000 credits landed in my account. The Zhou family worked fast. This was perfect timing. At 15.9% gene potential, I'd been feeling like food alone couldn't keep up with my body's energy demands anymore. I needed nutrient solutions. Before contacting my neighbor Qian Kuan, the nutrient solution distributor, I decided to check prices at the meat shop first. The butcher's eyes lit up when I finally asked about his supply. He showed me several brands from his locked refrigerator. Health Power C3, Lixing 3X, Star Power AAA, all mainstream products that officially cost 10,000 credits per bottle, but he sold for 3,000 each. 1 bottle equaled 100 kilograms of top-grade mutant beef and energy, fully absorbable with 0 side effects. Then he pulled out another brand, Hahawa, a local tourist brand that was a 1-to-1 copy of Health Power. This one cost 5,000 per bottle, but came through more legitimate channels. When I asked what channels, he lowered his voice and started explaining about the Hahawa Group's recent internal drama. Some power struggle between legitimate heirs and illegitimate children had caused chaos in their management, and product was leaking out of their contract factories due to lax oversight. The butcher's cheap nutrient solutions turned out to be unlabeled products with no quality guarantees. He claimed they leaked from factories due to some corporate power struggle, but I wasn't convinced. I told him I'd think about it and left. I contacted Qian Kuan instead. He met me in the dorm lobby that afternoon and showed me his wholesale price list. Health Power C3 at 6,500 credits per bottle, which was his actual cost. More than double the butcher's price, but far more trustworthy. I ordered 1 case and insisted on paying. Qian Kuan tried to give it to me for free as a friendship gift, but I wouldn't accept charity. We settled on his cost price. Then I casually asked him about those cheap, unlabeled nutrient solutions floating around the market. His face changed instantly. He warned me those were recycled waste, leftover residue from used bottles that shady dealers collected, filtered, and resold as new product. The low price was because it was basically contaminated garbage. I felt stupid for even considering the butcher's offer. All those elaborate stories about corporate drama were probably lies to justify selling recycled waste to naive students. Qian Kuan was probably confused by my question. In his mind, I was supposedly from some elite family. Why would someone like that know about black market waste products? I could tell he was struggling to figure me out, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Smart guy. That night at midnight, I headed to room 2202 for my session with Lin Yuechan. On the way in, I ran into Qin Xiao coming out again, sweaty from intense training, breathing hard. She gave me a brief nod and walked past without a word. Same as always. I watched her go, shrugged, and walked in. I walked into the training room, and Lin Yuechan told me to demonstrate basic fist and basic footwork without even turning around. Her tone was cool and testing. She clearly expected to be disappointed. I closed my eyes for a moment, settled my mind, then opened them. The instant I moved, everything was different from last time. My first punch ripped through the air with a hot, aggressive wind. No more limp, clumsy swinging. Every strike carried explosive power, every step burned with purpose. The blazing swiftness intent flowed naturally through everything. Fist and footwork merged into one seamless performance, the whole room seeming to heat up around me. When I finished and stood still, Lin Yuechan was completely silent. The training room was dead quiet except for the air conditioning hum. She stared at me for a long time before finally managing to speak, her voice slightly shaking. "Do it." Again, I did. Same explosive power, same burning intent, same fluid perfection. This time she watched with laser focus, analyzing every detail. When I finished the second run, I could see the storm raging behind her eyes. She was trying to process what she was seeing. A few days ago, I couldn't even stand properly or throw a straight punch. Now I was demonstrating perfection-level basics infused with martial intent. The same type of martial intent she'd spent 3 years in closed-door training to achieve, guided by multiple elite mentors and backed by her entire family's resources. Other methods existed too, life-or-death combat breakthroughs or advanced virtual reality machines only available on the Taurus main star, but none of them explained what I'd just done. I could tell she was remembering how she'd lectured me about not being overconfident, about how my combat talent was the worst she'd ever seen, about how I should maybe become a theoretical scholar instead. Her face was flushed, and not from the heat my punches had generated. After a long pause, she took a deep breath and forced her voice to sound calm. "Not bad. You did. Very well." Lin Yuechan asked how I'd done it. I gave her my prepared answer. I just watched her VR video every day until something clicked. She looked like she wanted to scream. She'd spent 3 years in closed-door training to achieve the same thing, and I told her I just watched videos until it felt right. She forced herself to move on and got serious about weapon selection. She explained that combat techniques had to match your martial intent. If they complemented each other, your power multiplied. If they clashed, both would suffer. To demonstrate, she pulled a short metal rod from a rack and told me to back up 10 meters. With a flick of her wrist, the rod extended into a gleaming 2-meter alloy spear, taller than she was. Then she attacked empty air, and it was terrifying. Her body moved like lightning, the spear tip generating actual sparks from air friction. Thrust, sweep, slash, smash. Every move was blindingly fast and utterly ruthless. The whole room felt like it was on fire. I could barely breathe standing 10 meters away. It felt less like watching a person and more like standing before a wildfire. She finished without breaking a sweat and explained this was her A-rank technique, Wildfire Prairie Spear. Pure offense, pure speed, pure explosive power, perfectly matched with her blazing swiftness intent. Combined with her fire attribute Crimson Sun technique, her strikes could literally ignite or explode inside an enemy's body. She said my Primordial Unity technique, having already awakened fire attributes, could work with this style too. She asked what weapon I preferred, blade, spear, sword, or staff. I said spear sounded good. My reasoning was simple. Long reach means I could kill enemies before they got close. Safe and efficient. But then I noticed something with my perfection-level fundamentals. Her spear technique was incredibly aggressive, but it was almost entirely offense with virtually no defense. Every move was all in attack, kill or be killed. I asked her about it. She nodded approvingly at my observation and explained that was exactly the point. The best defense is overwhelming offense that destroys the enemy before they can fight back. She said since I'd awakened the same blazing swiftness intent, we clearly shared the same aggressive style, which is why she recommended it. That's when I got confused. She thought I was some fearless berserker type? I'd picked the spear specifically because I wanted to poke people from a safe distance. I was the cautious, stay-alive-at-all-costs guy. How had she gotten the completely wrong impression of me? Lin Yuechan told me martial intent comes from the deepest part of your soul and never lies. She said other students had doubted their intent's direction too, but it always turned out to be right. She didn't push me to choose Wildfire Prairie Spear immediately though. She explained that all 3 A-rank spear techniques shared the same prerequisite, a C-rank technique called Gale Spear. Once I mastered that to a certain level, I could branch into 3 completely different directions. Wildfire Prairie Spear for pure offense, Skynet Spear for control, wrapping enemies in an endless web of attacks until they exhausted themselves, and Bedrock Mountain Spear for balanced offense and defense. No outstanding strengths, but no weaknesses either, perfect for surviving messy battlefields. I decided to start with Gale Spear. Build the foundation first. Choose the direction later. Lin Yuechan told me to buy it from the school's technique shop. 10 study credits or 100,000 cash. She warned me to always pay with credits points when possible since study credits were far more valuable than their cash equivalent. Then she offered me her referral code, which would earn her a commission, and she'd waive tonight's lesson fee as a congratulations gift for awakening martial intent. I tried to refuse, but she insisted, saying she'd only taught me basics and felt embarrassed charging me when I'd achieved so much on my own. She downloaded the complete Gale Spear package to my terminal but didn't demonstrate it personally. She said her muscle memory was too contaminated by her advanced technique, which would pollute my understanding of the Gale concept. She gave me one key tip. The essence of the technique was speed, and speed started with raising the spear, learning to point the spear tip at the enemy in the fastest, most efficient way possible. Master that one motion as instinct, and everything else would follow. Internally, I was thinking something very different. I didn't need key tips. I just needed to grind to max level. Then a terrible thought hit me. C-rank techniques were much harder to learn than D-rank. Basic fist took me 5 grueling days just to reach entry level. How long would a C-rank spear technique take? 10 days? 2 weeks? I couldn't afford that. So I asked Lin Yuechan, a bit embarrassed, if there was a D-rank spear technique with very few moves. Ideally, just one single move. Fewer moves meant faster repetitions, and one move meant I could grind hundreds of times per hour. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Another bizarre request. First, I wanted easy-to-learn techniques. Now I wanted one-move techniques? She couldn't figure out my logic at all, but I could see her trying to rationalize it. Maybe true genius-level thinkers just operated differently, mastering one pure concept and then expanding outward from there. Lin Yuechan found exactly what I needed. Gale Wind Spear Technique, a D-rank simplified version of the Gale Spear. The entire technique was just one single move, a rapid thrust. Perfect for practicing the 2 fundamental motions of raising the spear and stabbing. I bought it instantly for 20,000 credits. She also offered me free use of her training room every night from midnight to 9 a.m., since practicing spear techniques in the dorm would punch holes in walls and get me evicted. I thanked her gratefully. Then I made a mistake. I asked her about the Shin Su Heart Sutra, the dual cultivation technique from the gala. I just wanted her professional opinion on whether it was worth buying. She gave me the strangest look. "What exactly are you getting at, young man?" she said with a half-smile. I realized how it sounded, a young guy asking his female teacher about dual cultivation techniques. I frantically explained I just wanted purchasing advice, but she clearly thought I was either flirting or getting distracted from serious training. She didn't get angry, though. Instead, she said with a teasing wink, "Get into the top 100 on the entrance exam, and I'll tell you about it. Good luck." Then she left. I stood there confused. What did that mean exactly? Top 100 in sheet. Teach me about it. I shook those thoughts out of my head fast. Focus on the exam first. I was currently ranked 9,988th. I grabbed a metal rod from the weapon rack, flicked my wrist like she had, and it extended into a 2-meter alloy spear with a satisfying click. Pretty cool. I opened the Gale Wind teaching video and studied the single move carefully. The instructor demonstrated raising the spear, a coordinated wrist, forearm, and core motion focused on efficiency, then the explosive thrust channeling full body power into one point. Something clicked immediately. The core mechanics of this thrust were eerily similar to the drilling punch and cannon punch from basic fist technique. Different tools, bare hands versus a spear, but the internal logic of force transmission was essentially identical. My perfection-level fist fundamentals were directly transferable. I closed the video, gripped the spear, sank my weight, and executed the move. Raise. Thrust. The spear screamed through the air and stopped precisely where I aimed, the shaft humming with vibration. The system pinged. Gale Wind Spear Technique. Entry level achieved. Locked. I stood there stunned. That was one try. One single attempt. Having perfected the basics really did make everything connect. I tried the Gale Spear Techniques VR video for an hour and gave up. 36 variations, all interconnected, requiring coordination and energy control far beyond my current level. I couldn't even mimic the first move properly. C-rank was truly a different league. So I went back to what worked. The Gale Wind Spear, one move, 1 thrust. I unlocked it with a permission point, and the system showed level 1 needing just 10 progress points. Same as all D-rank techniques. I started grinding. Raise spear, thrust. Raise spear, thrust. Over and over. Every completion counted regardless of form quality. Level 2 in 30 seconds. Level 3 in a minute. 1 hour later, level 10. Maximum. Perfection. The little figure in my mind now held a spear, executing the thrust with lightning speed and earth-shattering force. My gene potential hit 16%, physical and mental stats both reached 150, and my blazing swiftness martial intent had jumped to 552 out of 1,000. More than half, just from grinding this one technique. With the spear at perfection, I reopened the Gale Spear video. Now I could see through every thrust-related variation easily. But there were whole sections involving whipping and shaking the spear, completely different movement systems that made no sense to me yet. Trying to force my way through entry level would waste too much time. I decided to ask Lin Yuechan tomorrow if there were simplified D-rank techniques for those spear motions too, just like Gale Wind covered the thrust. If so, I could grind each one to perfection, and then the full Gale Spear would click together naturally. Mushi called at 2 a.m. to check on me. I told her I was training and she should sleep. Then I spent the rest of the night grinding 8 treasures technique in the training room, which felt even more efficient now with the martial intent passively boosting everything. At exactly 9 a.m., the door opened and Lin Yuechan walked in. She saw me standing there looking fresh and energized after being in her training room all night. I could tell from her expression that her first thought was wondering whether her teasing comment last night had given me the wrong idea about why I'd stayed. The next morning, I asked Lin Yuechan about simplified D-rank techniques for the other spear motions. She laughed at my approach but confirmed they existed. Oscillation spear method for the shaking technique and spiral spear dance for the rotational footwork and sweeping moves, plus basic spear technique as a general foundation. I thanked her and left when her next student arrived. Back home, Mushi worried I was spreading myself too thin with so many techniques. I told her the Gale Wind instructor's form wasn't even as good as mine. She laughed and clearly didn't believe me. I offered to teach her, but she insisted I focus on my own training. I spent 10 hours doing deep primordial unity cultivation, drank a nutrient solution, ate a huge meal plus another solution, and checked the date, September 26th. 5 days until the entrance exam. That night, I went to the training room and spent 4 hours trying to learn the 3 new spear techniques. None of them clicked instantly like Gale Wind had. Each had unique mechanics I couldn't shortcut through. No perfection-level breakthrough this time. I made a practical decision. Stop chasing new technique entries. With only 5 days left, I'd focus entirely on grinding primordial unity and 8 treasures to higher levels. I went back to the dorm where the spiritual energy was denser for internal cultivation. I kept running into Qin Xiao at the training room. She was using it for extra practice too. We'd exchange brief nods, but never spoke. The next morning, I went for my second fertility project appointment. 3 more successful conceptions, 3 more permission points. My stockpile was growing nicely. Then Yu Jinhai called, overjoyed about the successful pregnancy. But he quickly shifted to a proposal. His family had 3 more women of childbearing age, and he wanted to skip the official medical route entirely. He offered 1 million credits for me to do it, the direct way. 1 million credits. For sleeping with 3 women from his family. My heart pounded. Was this guy seriously testing my moral fiber like this? I almost said yes to Yu Jinhai's offer on the spot. 1 million credits for direct involvement with 3 women from his family. But I caught myself. There had to be a catch. Nothing that easy comes without strings attached. Plus, the entrance exam was days away. I told him we'd discuss it after the exam. He took it well and wished me luck. Back to grinding. 10 more hours of cultivation left me so hungry that a full meal and a nutrient solution still weren't enough. 2 bottles a day at 6,500 each. Without those 12 fertility projects paying me, I couldn't afford this lifestyle. Training at this level burned through money fast. Then Mushi asked me to stop going to the fertility center. She showed me a breaking news story about the Hahawa Group, a massive corporate empire whose owner, war god Zhongqing, had recently died. After his death, 30 people showed up claiming to be his illegitimate children, all with verified genetic reports from official fertility management centers. They were demanding inheritance rights, and the scandal had rocked the entire Taurus constellation. The Empire was launching an investigation. Insiders said Zhongqing had accepted private deals from certain families during his early warrior days at fertility centers. Those under-the-table arrangements had created these children who were now tearing his legacy apart. I immediately thought of Yu Zhenhai's phone call. That sly old man. His direct method proposal was probably the same kind of play. Not for inheritance centuries later, but for right now. Creating a blood connection that would obligate me to help his family if I ever became powerful. 100 million credit bet on my future, basically. Honestly, I didn't mind. My system literally required more children. And worrying about what happens after I die. I'll be dead, not my problem. Just then, a notification popped up. The Xiansu Heart Sutra sale had 1 hour left. I didn't hesitate. I bought it on a 10-year interest-free installment plan. Less than 10,000 credits per month. Easily affordable now. Mushi told me she believed my future achievements would surpass even war god Zhongqing's. I grinned and told her to keep the compliments coming, then swept her off her feet and carried her to the bedroom. Didn't you need to train? She squeaked, face bright red. I just bought the Xiansu Heart Sutra, I said with a grin. Time for us to study it together. She buried her burning face in my chest and didn't argue. The Xiansu Heart Sutra didn't go well. The technique required the lead practitioner to guide both partners into perfect synchronization, spirit, willpower, even physical rhythm. I couldn't pull it off, not even close. Mushi was exhausted afterward, drenched in sweat and completely drained. I tucked her in and quietly left the bedroom. She looked disappointed in herself, like she'd failed me again. That gap in our abilities was weighing on her, and I could see it. I sat down and ran a cycle of primordial unity to calm my restless energy. Then my terminal buzzed with the official entrance exam rules. The format was interesting. Phase 1 was a point-based round-robin. Every student gets matched against 15 random opponents in one-on-one fights over 3 days. Win by knockout or surrender to gain a point. Lose 1 if you're the one going down. But here was the twist. Your starting score was based on your gene potential at enrollment. So someone who registered at 20% would start with 20 points before fighting anyone. Phase 2 took the top 200 scorers into a single elimination bracket to determine final rankings. The prizes were the same as announced before. Top 1,000 gets 100 study credits. Top 100 gets A-rank technique library access. Top 10 gets a special body refining elixir. The system was designed to be brutally honest. Talent literally determined your starting line. Higher gene potential meant higher base score and usually stronger combat ability. The school was telling every freshman on day 1. In this world, the gifted start ahead. My current gene potential was 16%, which should be competitive. Getting into the top 1,000 seemed doable. Then I reread one line and my stomach dropped, based on the gene potential recorded at registration. When I checked in, my gene potential was 10.3%. My base score was 10 points. Not 16. 10 measly points, while everyone with rich families and deep resources would be starting at 15, 18, maybe 20 or higher. I stared at the screen, feeling a wave of pure frustration. Who designed this garbage rule? Why not use current potential instead of the number from weeks ago? This was completely unfair. Oh, and the Xiansu Heart Sutra attempt lasted. Let's just say it was embarrassingly brief. I need a lot more practice with that one. I forced myself to calm down and read the rest of the rules. Weapons would be standardized by the school, fair enough. But armor and medicine were bring your own, which meant another advantage for rich kids with custom combat suits and premium recovery drugs. I had nothing but the basic suit I'd bought before the recruitment exam. Still, complaining wouldn't help. If 10 points wasn't enough, I'd just win more fights. And if this exam didn't go perfectly, I'd keep having more children until my system made me unstoppable. I messaged Lin Yuechan for advice. She squeezed me in at 3 a.m. for 30 minutes. The exam rules had every new student flooding her with questions. When I arrived, Qin Xiaoxiao was leaving as usual. Silent nod, nothing more. Lin Yuechan asked about my gene potential. I told her my registered number was 10.3%. She took it calmly. For a grassroots talent, that was decent at enrollment. She probably estimated I'd grown to around 15% by now, which she'd consider impressive but explainable for someone who'd never had proper training before. She broke down the math. The average freshman gene potential was around 11 to 13%, so average base scores would be 13 points. Historically, 15 total points got you into the top 1,000. An average student needed about a 60% win rate, 9 wins, 6 losses, for 3 net points plus their base score. But with my base of only 10, I needed 5 net points, at least 10 wins out of 15. Much harder. Though with your current strength, she added, it's not impossible. On equipment, she said combat suit quality mattered less than I feared at the 1-star warrior level. A 100,000 credit suit performed nearly as well as a 10 million one for us beginners. Medicine was similar, helpful, but not fight deciding. If I faced someone who'd bought their way to power, I should just surrender rather than risk injury. But insurance was absolutely mandatory. People could genuinely die in these fights, and without money for emergency treatment after a serious wound, the consequences were real. As she wrapped up, she said, "Good luck," with that playful tone again. Something possessed me to ask if she'd give me a reward for making the top 1,000. She looked at me with that teasing half-smile. Top 1,000, and you want a reward? Come back when you hit top 100, little boy. I walked out feeling like I'd been played again. I walked out of the training room, feeling my face burn. Teased again by Lin Yuechan. I couldn't help wondering when I'd ever be on equal footing with her. She was a transcendent warrior at over 100% gene potential. I was at 16%. Long way to go. On the way out, I nearly bumped into a girl wearing the Star Meteorite Series combat suit, the one that cost nearly 10 million credits. Rich people really live differently. Back home, I told Mushi everything. She immediately went into battle mode, insisting we buy the best equipment we could afford. She was ready to squeeze money from her parents again if needed. I stopped her. The fertility projects were covering our expenses now. She blushed at the mention and told me to stop doing those after this. I agreed out loud, while silently knowing that was never going to happen. I found a great combat suit online, the Guardian, from Xingmi Heavy Industries, a local brand known for solid construction and incredible value. At around 1 million credits, it matched suits costing several times more. The design borrowed heavily from fancier brands. But who cared? Performance mattered. I ordered it along with high-grade recovery medicines and the mandatory new student worry-free insurance, 10,000 credits a year, which stung. Total damage, about 1.5 million credits, all on installments. The suit arrived within 2 hours. Black, heavy-looking, with reinforced plating at the shoulders, elbows, and knees. It auto-adjusted to my body perfectly. Mushi said I looked amazing in it. The last 3 days before the exam, I went into complete isolation training. When I finally opened my eyes on October 1st, the results were incredible. Primordial Unity hit level 6. 8 treasures reached level 6. Blazing Swiftness Martial Intent climbed to level 2. My gene potential had surged to 18%, with physical and mental stats both at 165 and spiritual energy at 130. My base score was still a pathetic 10 points, but my actual strength was far beyond what that number suggested. Mushi had breakfast and fresh clothes ready. I suited up in the Guardian, ate fast, and headed out. The entire campus was buzzing with nervous energy, thousands of freshmen streaming toward the combat arenas. My first match was at 8 a.m., Arena 988. I grabbed a standard metal rod from the weapon rack, extended it into a 2-meter spear, and waited. Then my opponent walked in. She wore the Star Meteorite suit, that unmistakable 10 million credit masterpiece. I recognized her instantly. Yi Qinghan, my neighbor. The girl who looked at me like I was dirt every time we crossed paths. The Shinka Biotech representative from the gala. The moment she saw me, disgust twisted across her face. She clearly wanted this over as fast as possible. Every second looking at me was contaminating her eyes. The feeling wasn't mutual. I just gripped my spear and smiled. The holographic screen above the arena displayed both our stats. We were almost mirror images on paper, both ranked near the bottom, both registered at 10.3% gene potential, both starting with 10 base points. Nobody watching would expect anything special from this match. The whole school was running 1,000 simultaneous fights across 1,000 arenas, all live-streamed. But everyone was watching the top-ranked arenas, 1 through 10. Our arena, number 988, had barely anyone tuning in. Just a handful of friends and family. Mushi was watching from the dorm, calling her father so the whole Bai family could watch together. She was quietly cheering me on. On Yi Qinghan's side, her entire wealthy family was gathered in some massive estate watching on a 300-inch screen. Her father and two uncles sat casually discussing her progress. Apparently, she'd reached 13% gene potential using the latest gene editing technology, though her father thought she should be at 15% if she'd worked harder. They talked about how kids on the main Taurus star became warriors at age 8 and pushed for transcendence at 10. Nobody in that room gave me a second thought. To them, I was just background noise their precious ninth daughter would sweep aside. In the arena, Yi Qinghan grabbed a standard alloy blade and stared at me with pure contempt. In her eyes, I was a disgusting lowlife who sold his genetic material for pocket change. She wanted to end this in 1 second. The countdown hit 0. The bell rang. She moved instantly. Her body became a streak of lightning crossing the entire arena in a blink. Her blade traced a cold arc aimed straight at my throat. It was a B-rank blade technique called Gale Thunder Slash, trained to the mastery level with expensive private tutoring. For a freshman, it was devastatingly fast and precise. She was completely sure this would end it. But then her eyes shrank to pinpoints. Her whole body froze mid-strike. Time seemed to stop. She felt something cold and sharp pressing against her chest. She looked down slowly. A silver spear tip had already pierced clean through her 10 million credit star meteorite combat suit, emerging from the other side of her chest. There wasn't even blood on it. She never saw me move. She never saw the spear come. By the time her attack reached where I'd been standing, my strike had already ended it. She had no idea when it happened. Neither did anyone watching. Yi Qinghan collapsed before she even understood what happened. A medical worker appeared instantly, stabilizing her with an injection. She tried to protest, tried to say she hadn't lost, but blood filled her throat, and all she managed were choking sounds. The last thing she saw was my face, calm, almost indifferent, as if what I'd just done was nothing. The screen above flashed, Lin Xie, victory. The broadcast replayed it in super slow motion with the sponsor's data analysis. The moment Yi Qinghan charged, my spear had already launched, faster than her attack, meeting her mid-rush with a single perfect gale wind thrust. No fancy moves, just one strike. The data readout showed my peak impact force, over 10,000 kilograms. Back in the dorm, Mushi jumped off the sofa cheering. In Haicheng, my father-in-law and Uncle Jinyun were stunned speechless. During their own peak warrior years, they'd never exceeded 2,000 kilograms. I was 5 times beyond that. At the Yi family estate, dead silence. Their entire clan sat frozen in shock. Yi Qinghan's father figured out that the strike was based on the Gale Spear lineage, and his brother estimated my gene potential had to be at least 16% with the technique near perfection level to generate that kind of force. They realized I'd been hiding my true strength behind that low registration number. The old man's face was dark. They'd spent nearly 50 million credits on their daughter's equipment and training, and she'd been knocked out in the first second of her first match. In the restroom between fights, I reflected on what happened. Honestly, that expensive star meteorite suit had intimidated me into going all out from the start. I hadn't held back at all. Turns out she was a paper tiger. One thrust went clean through everything. 30 minutes later, fight 2. My opponent was a big guy with a sword and shield, ranked around 9,115. He was cautious, didn't rush me like Yi Qinghan had. He set up behind his shield and watched me carefully. I had reach advantage with my 2-meter spear against his short blade. I circled, found my opening, and struck at his face. He got his shield up in time. The impact dented his alloy shield so badly it nearly crumpled. The force traveled through and numbed his entire arm. He was still processing the shock when my spear tip had already slipped past his guard and opened his throat. Blood sprayed everywhere. 2 fights, 2 instant kills. The rest of the morning was basically a highlight reel starring me. Every opponent, attackers, defenders, speedsters, went down the same way. 1 spear thrust. Done. By 11:30 a.m., I'd finished 5 fights. 5 wins, 0 losses. 5 net points put my total at 15, matching last year's cutoff for the top 1,000. My ranking had already rocketed from 9,988th to 818th, since each win swapped me into the loser's position. Honestly, I was confused. These weren't weak fighters. My 5th opponent had started at rank 818, which was solidly mid-tier among 10,000 freshmen. But none of them could handle even a single strike from me. Was it the perfection-level fundamentals? The martial intent? I'd expected a grueling battle with my low base score, but it was turning out to be completely one-sided. At lunch, I ran into Qian Kuan on my way back to the dorm. He looked rough, combat suit torn up, bandages on his face and neck. For fights, 2 wins, 2 losses. He nearly died out there. When he saw me walking back without a scratch on my suit, his jaw practically hit the floor. He introduced me to 2 other freshmen nearby, Chun Fanyu and Li Qianyu. Qian Kuan called me Lin Xie from the Haiqing Lin family, keeping up his assumption about my elite background. They smiled politely. After we parted ways in the elevator, I'm pretty sure they didn't believe I'd done well. Living on the 298th floor meant I was bottom tier in their eyes. One of them probably figured I'd gotten my suit destroyed and changed into a new one to save face. Then the school's official top 10 morning highlights video dropped. I was ranked number 1. The announcement said I'd won all 5 matches in under 5 minutes total, and they replayed my kills with full data overlays. That one thrust finish from my first fight against Yi Qinghan was the featured clip. Somewhere in an elevator, those 2 freshmen who dismissed me were watching that exact video with their mouths hanging open, realizing the bottom-tier loser they'd just met was the day's top performer. When I got back to the dorm, Mushi launched herself into my arms before I even closed the door, kissing me with eyes full of pure admiration. She'd been watching every fight. Lin Yuechan saw the top 10 highlight video too. Apparently she smiled and said, "Not bad," which from her was practically a standing ovation. As for Yi Qinghan, she'd been treated in the medical center, but the real damage was psychological. My strike had left her with a deep fear. That burning, unstoppable death sensation haunted her through her remaining fights. She went 1 win, 2 losses in her next 3 matches, and ended up back in the hospital. But when she watched the highlight video and saw me doing the same thing to everyone else, something shifted inside her. She realized she wasn't weak. I was just that far above everyone. Losing to me became slightly easier to accept. My afternoon started with Fight 6. I walked into Arena 765 and froze for a second. It was Su Qingying, the Ice Mountain Goddess, from Haiqing First High. She didn't recognize me at first. I was just vaguely familiar to her. But the moment I extended my spear, it clicked. The guy who knocked out Yin Feilong. The dark horse from the Grain District. Our stats showed on screen. We were both sitting at 15 total points, but her registered gene potential was 12% to my 10.3%. She was ranked 748th to my 818th. She set up with shield and blade in a defensive stance. Smart. She knew the spear gave me reach advantage. Her plan was obvious. Block my first thrust with the shield, close the distance to within a meter, and make my long weapon useless at point-blank range. Then she unleashed her killing intent. A wave of cold, razor-sharp, murderous pressure rolled toward me like an Arctic wind. It slammed straight into my blazing swiftness martial intent and shattered like ice hitting a furnace. My will erupted without restraint, burning, aggressive, overwhelming. The temperature in the arena seemed to spike. Su Qingying physically shuddered. Her cold aura melted away instantly under the pressure of something fundamentally higher level. I could see it in her eyes, that flash of primal fear, the sudden realization that she was standing inside a wildfire with nowhere to run. Her confidence cracked before the fight even started. Su Qingying felt the humiliation of having her killing intent crushed by my martial will. She was shaken but forced herself to stay rational, refusing to believe someone from a backwater district could have achieved true martial intent. She convinced herself it was an illusion. Then I attacked. My first thrust came like black lightning. She blocked it perfectly with her shield, the first person all day to actually stop my opening strike. She'd planned to use the rebound force to rush in close. But her battle instincts screamed danger. She trusted them and leaped backward instead of forward. My second thrust grazed her neck, drawing blood. She barely avoided having her throat pierced. The speed of my follow-up shocked her. The gap between my first and second strikes was almost non-existent. This was my first miss of the entire tournament. Fighting someone actually strong was clearly different. I didn't chase her. After 5 fights, I understood my strengths and weaknesses perfectly. My perfected Gale Wind thrust was practically a guaranteed kill within 1.5 to 2.5 meters. Outside that range, pursuing an opponent left me vulnerable. Better to let her come to me. She was the one bleeding, the one burning energy. If she wanted to win, she had to attack. She knew it too. Staying back meant slowly dying. She gathered her cold, killing intent again, purer and more concentrated than before, and charged straight at me like a ground-level predator. I thrust again. She deflected it with her small shield, the impact sending the shield flying from her numbed hand. She'd closed the distance. But I'd already stepped backward simultaneously, one simple retreat step from basic footwork. It reopened the gap to just over 2 meters. Right back in my kill zone. Her instincts screamed again, but it was too late. My second thrust punched through her combat suit into her left chest. Then I detonated a burst of fire attribute spiritual energy inside her body. The explosion blew her backward, blood spraying from her mouth. She crashed to the ground, clutching her wound in shock. If she hadn't instinctively pulled back that half step, the spear would have hit her heart, and the internal detonation would have killed her. She stared up at me with a mix of horror and fury. I'd revealed something she hadn't expected at all, not just martial intent, but fire attribute spiritual energy attacks. In her mind, that meant I was practicing at least a B-rank offensive cultivation technique on top of everything else. Before she could process any of it, my third thrust was already coming. The spear tip expanding in her vision like death itself closing in. Su Qingying managed to block my third thrust with her blade at the last second, but the impact sent her weapon flying. She screamed her surrender, face white as paper. She knew continuing meant death. As the medics rushed in, I looked at the result of my attack and felt a bit awkward. I'd actually been aiming for her spine to disable her, but she twisted at the last moment and the strike hit. Somewhere more embarrassing. That really wasn't intentional. Back in the dorm, Mushi watched the replay and shuddered. She looked down at herself and said she couldn't imagine if that happened to her. The brutality of Galaxy University's entrance exam was on a completely different level from anything she'd seen before. The live stream for my arena had exploded from a handful of viewers to over 500. The comments section went wild, people calling me ruthless, praising my footwork to counter-thrust combo as textbook-level technique, and making jokes about what happened to Su Qingying. Apparently Mujia was watching too. He'd typed one of those jokes himself, then immediately called his dad demanding to drop out of his university in Tiantai and transfer to Telecity so he could follow me around. Uncle Jinyan screamed at him through the phone and hung up. Poor kid. Fight 7 was quick. A huge guy with a giant sword charged at me like a bull. My blazing swiftness martial intent hit him mid-charge, and his momentum stuttered for just a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. One thrust. Done. Score, 17 points. Rank 599. Fight 8 paired me against someone interesting. A guy named Gao Yuan, ranked 455th with 14% gene potential. His livestream was already packed with old classmates from Tiantai First High cheering him on. They called him the Spear God of Tiantai First High, saying his spear skills had surpassed all his school's teachers. He'd apparently only ever lost once, to his father when he was 9, and beaten him a month later. Even Lu Zhenlong could only beat him by using martial intent. When Gao Yuan saw me pick up a spear, he smiled. Spear against spear, he'd never lost that matchup. In his eyes, I was just a bottom-tier dark horse who'd gotten lucky climbing this far. He was absolutely certain he would win. The fight with Gao Yuan started the same way as the others. I unleashed my blazing swiftness intent the moment the bell rang. His confident expression shattered instantly. He couldn't believe a bottom-tier fighter had martial intent, something only monsters like Lu Zhenlong were supposed to possess. That moment of shock cost him. My first thrust was already flying at him. To his credit, he managed to block it, the only person besides Su Qingying to stop my opening strike. His spear fundamentals were genuinely excellent, probably better than mine in pure technique. But technique alone couldn't save him. Under the constant pressure of my martial intent, his movements grew sluggish, his hands trembled, and his defense shrank with each exchange. My simple repeated thrusts, the same single move over and over, hammered against his guard like a battering ram. On the 5th thrust, I broke through and pierced his shoulder. Fire energy detonated inside the wound. His right arm went limp. But the guy was crazy. He switched to his left hand and threw a desperate counter thrust aimed at my heart. His spear never made it. Mine was already through his chest. 8 straight wins. The live stream went silent, then erupted. Gao Yuan's classmates couldn't believe their once-in-a-century spear genius had been dismantled in seconds. Mujia was watching too. He'd been preparing to defend my honor in the comments. But the fight ended before he could even type. He had a moment of clarity. Every opponent I'd faced was the undisputed genius of their own city, the star everyone admired. But they'd all run into me. Fight 9 brought something completely new. My opponent, a girl named Sun Yuning, ranked 299th, grabbed a bow instead of a melee weapon. She immediately backpedaled 50 meters to the far end of the arena. A ranged fighter. I hadn't prepared for this at all. The bell rang, and she moved instantly. Draw, knock, aim, fire, all in one fluid motion. A metal arrow screamed across the arena at my face. I barely dodged it using basic footwork, the arrow grazing my cheek and drawing blood. That was close. A tenth of a second slower, and I'd have taken an arrow through the skull. My spear was useless at 50 meters. This was going to be a very different kind of fight. The archer girl was a real problem. 50 meters away, shooting arrows at my face before I could even think about closing the distance. Her first shot nearly took my head off. I dodged by a hair's width, the arrow grazing my cheek and drawing blood. Her second arrow followed almost instantly. I couldn't keep dodging forever. A spear was useless at this range, and she'd just kite me to death if I didn't do something drastic. I got angry. I unleashed my blazing swiftness martial intent at full force, projecting it across the entire arena. That invisible wave of burning pressure slammed into her from 50 meters away. She froze mid-draw, eyes wide with terror. To her, the whole world suddenly turned into a wall of fire closing in on her. That was my opening. I sprinted straight at her like a cannonball. 50 meters. 40. 30. By the time she recovered enough to shoot her third arrow, her hands were shaking so badly it flew completely wide. She was fumbling for a fourth arrow when I appeared in front of her. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't looking at a person anymore. She was staring into a wildfire that would swallow her whole. Her mouth opened to surrender, but my spear was faster. The thrust went through her chest, and the impact carried her backward, pinning her to the arena wall with a heavy thud. She managed to whisper, "I surrender," before coughing up blood. The medics peeled her off the wall and rushed her to treatment. I stood there gasping. That 50-meter charge plus the full power final thrust had drained most of my stamina. 9 wins, 0 losses. The livestream went crazy. Comments about me being the biggest dark horse of the year, people calling the fight a 10-second massacre, someone even asking for my contact info. What I didn't know was that Sun Yuning had an older sister, Sun Yuyun, a fourth-year student at Galaxy University. She watched her little sister get pinned to a wall on live stream and was absolutely furious. She was already planning something. And in the medical center's VIP room, Yi Qinghan was watching replays of my fights against Su Qingying and Sun Yuning over and over. Something strange was happening inside her head. She kept comparing their injuries to hers and somehow concluded that her own defeat hadn't been as humiliating. She caught herself thinking about helping me, then got flustered and confused by her own feelings. She couldn't understand why she kept watching. I sat in the rest area drinking nutrient solution, completely unaware that I'd already attracted the attention of people I really didn't need paying attention to me. Fight 10. My opponent was Lu Feng, ranked 201st, a dual-blade fighter whose fan club was flooding the live stream with hype about their once-in-a-century genius. My regular viewers were already making jokes. The last, once-in-a-century genius, lasted about 5 seconds. The bell rang. Lu Feng charged at me with impressive killing intent. Cold, sharp, refined through countless battles. For a split second it felt familiar, almost like Su Qingying's. But the moment it touched my blazing swiftness, it evaporated like ice thrown into lava. His mind went blank, his body froze mid-charge. 1 thrust through the heart. 3 seconds. Done. 10 wins. 0 losses. My score hit 20 points, and my rank shot up to 201st, 1 spot away from qualifying for the top 200 elimination round. In a single day, I'd climbed from 9,988th to 201st, nearly 10,000 places. The nickname, One spear guy was everywhere now: forums, live streams, social media. My viewer count had gone from a handful of family members to thousands of regulars. Everyone wanted to know who this mysterious dark horse was. But I wasn't celebrating. I kept thinking about the Archer fight. I'd won easily because Sun Yuning crumbled under my martial intent. But what if I faced a stronger ranged fighter with their own martial will? I had no real counter for that. I needed to fix this weakness during the 3-hour break before my final 5 evening matches. My terminal was flooded with messages. Congratulations from the Gala families. Qian Kuan spamming emoji, hundreds of friend requests from strangers, including some very inappropriate photos. I ignored all of it. I called Lin Yuechan and asked to use the training room. She sounded both amused and impressed. Congratulations on 10 straight wins. Come over, I'm here. It's free today. I called Mushi next to tell her I wouldn't be coming home tonight. She offered to bring me nutrient solutions, but I reminded her she couldn't enter the teaching area. She understood and just told me to do my best. When I pushed open the door to room 2202, a blast of hot wind hit my face. Lin Yuechan was in the middle of the room, practicing with her spear, her body a spinning streak of crimson lightning, the weapon alive in her hands like a fire dragon, every swing trailing visible shockwaves and sharp cracks of displaced air. When I showed Lin Yuechan the replay of my Archer fight and explained my worry about ranged opponents, I told her I wanted to learn a throwing spear technique called the Ma Shadow Javelin, a simple one-move D-rank skill. She almost laughed in my face. She pointed out that professional archers trained from age 4 or 5, and I was trying to compete with them using a beginner throwing technique. That was like bringing a hobby to a professional fight. But then she gave me the real answer. My problem wasn't that I needed ranged attacks. I needed to survive the ranged attacks long enough to close the distance. I was a spear fighter. My strength was devastating close-range power. The solution wasn't throwing things, it was carrying a shield. She tossed me a small alloy buckler and explained that spear users couldn't carry heavy shields since spears required two-handed control. But a small wrist shield or buckler would work perfectly. And there was a D-rank technique called Basic Small Shield Technique with just one core move: deflect and redirect force. Exactly my style. I told her she really understood me. She gave me a big eye roll and muttered something about me doing this on purpose, then practically fled the training room. Apparently, she was worried my weird training philosophy was contagious. She'd accidentally started recommending D-rank basics to her other students, and they'd looked at her like she was crazy. She felt like spending time with me was corrupting her professional reputation. The moment she left, I bought the shield technique and opened a VR tutorial. The instructor showed how to angle the shield's surface at the moment of impact, redirecting force along the curve rather than absorbing it head-on. With my perfected fundamentals, I could immediately understand the mechanics behind every movement. 30 minutes of watching. Then I picked up the shield, replicated the motion, wrist turn, body shift, angle the surface. The system pinged. Basic small shield technique. Entry level achieved. I burned 1 permission point to unlock it instantly. Level 1. Needing just 10 progress points to reach level 2. Same beautiful D-rank progression as everything else. Time to grind. 15 minutes. That's all it took to max out basic small shield technique to level 10. My gene potential only went up 0.3% though. Lin Yuechan explained that D-rank techniques mostly trained the same body parts I'd already perfected through my basic fist and footwork, so the returns were shrinking. She also told me to stop asking her for D-rank recommendations. Her message had a sharp edge to it. I wondered if I'd annoyed her, or if maybe she was just going through something. I decided not to overthink it and focus on training. With 2 hours before my evening matches, I dove into the school's technique library and grabbed 3 more D-rank skills that each had only one core move. I found Ma Shadow Javelin, the throwing technique Lin Yuechan had dismissed earlier, but I didn't care. Then from its review section, I discovered Chen's Flying Shield, and the store's algorithm recommended Basic Shield Strike. I ground all 3 to perfection in 2 hours flat. The gene potential gain was tiny, just 0.2% total from all 3. But the real prize was my martial intent. Blazing Swiftness jumped to level 3. The difference was massive. At level 1, it was like a newborn. Level 2, a toddler learning to walk. Level 3 felt like a completely different creature. The burning will was now woven into my very soul, no longer needing conscious activation. When I stood still, it simmered like magma deep underground. When I wanted to fight, it erupted like a volcano, consuming everything in sight. The pressure it could put on enemies had grown exponentially. My stats now read: Gene potential 18.5%, physical and mental both at 170, spiritual energy at 130. 7 techniques maxed out, plus level 3 martial intent. With 30 minutes before my next fight, I drank a nutrient solution and headed out. Mushi was waiting outside the teaching area with a whole case of Health Power C3. She ran over the moment she saw me. I took the box with one hand and pulled her into a hug with the other. She turned bright red. She told me later that just looking into my eyes made her feel like her whole body had been set on fire from the inside out. My martial intent was apparently leaking even when I wasn't trying. She whispered, "Good luck," in the smallest voice possible, and I headed toward the arenas for my final 5 fights of the night. Fight 11 was supposed to be my gateway into the top 200. My opponent was Ling Xiaoqing, ranked 187th. A towering girl nearly 6 feet 3, tan skin, built like an athlete, wielding 2 heavy fist shields. Her registered gene potential was 17%, which made me tense up. But the moment the bell rang and I released my martial intent, something unexpected happened. She felt the pressure. Her face twisted like she'd swallowed something rotten, and she stomped the ground hard enough to dent it. "Another freak," she yelled. "This one's even stronger than the last ones." Then she threw her hand up and screamed, "I surrender." The match ended 1 second after it started. I stood there completely stunned. Turns out she'd already lost to 4 consecutive opponents who had martial intent. After being badly injured in the first loss, she'd surrendered instantly in the next 3. She was traumatized. My level 3 intent was the strongest she'd felt yet, so she didn't even bother trying. But instead of leaving, she marched right up to me, hands on her hips, and demanded to be friends. She wanted to learn how to awaken martial intent. So there we were, in front of thousands of viewers, scanning each other's contact codes in the middle of the arena right after a fight. The live stream chat went insane. People were dying laughing at the most wholesome moment of the entire tournament. She told me she'd been on track for the top 100 before hitting this wall of martial intent users. She vowed she'd figure it out within 3 months and come back stronger. I wished her luck. Fight 12, a monkey-like guy with a long staff, ranked 149th. He leaped high and swung down at me with everything he had. My level 3 intent froze him midair. 1 thrust ended it before he landed. 12 straight wins. The viewers were getting numb to it. The chat had moved past discussing my opponents and started placing bets on when my winning streak would finally break. Then my 13th match loaded. I walked into Arena 89 and saw my opponent enter from the other side. Dark red combat suit. Short hair. Cold, beautiful face. It was Qin Xiaoxiao. For hours before our match, Qin Xiaoxiao had walked into the medical center covered in wounds, but victorious. She'd beaten a martial intent user and, in the process, awakened her own martial will, ice-killing intent. She'd clawed her way into the top 100. She'd run into Gao Yuan there, the spear genius I'd already defeated. He tried to excuse his loss by blaming my martial intent. She'd looked at him with pure contempt. In her mind, losing was losing. Blaming the opponent's advantages was just weakness. She'd seen my highlight reel on the forum afterward. 10 straight kills. She acknowledged I was strong, but convinced herself I'd only dominated because my opponents lacked martial intent. Now that she had her own, she believed she'd be on equal footing spiritually, and superior in every other category. Techniques, combat experience, family resources, everything. She was absolutely certain she would beat me. Now here we stood, facing each other in Arena 89. The live stream had exploded, thousands of viewers screaming about the fire versus ice showdown. Then she did something none of my previous opponents had done. She pulled out 3 gleaming injection vials from her tactical pouch and calmly stuck them into her neck one by one. The first, a red berserk factor, made her muscles visibly swell with explosive power. The second, a blue cheetah spirit, enhanced her agility and reaction speed dramatically. The third, a gold spirit vein expansion fluid, widened her energy channels, boosting her spiritual energy flow and total reserves. These weren't ordinary drugs. They were cutting-edge biotech products her family's trading company sourced from top research firms across the star system. Unavailable on the open market, zero side effects, and they even provided permanent subtle enhancement after the effects wore off. Her skin flushed red, her muscles bulged against her combat suit, and she seemed to grow several centimeters taller. The raw power radiating off her was on a completely different level from anyone I'd faced today. This was the gap between a grassroots fighter and a true elite. She had family backing, top-tier techniques, freshly awakened martial intent, and now 3 injections of military-grade enhancement drugs flowing through her veins. She believed she was invincible. I gripped my spear tighter. The live stream went crazy when Qin Xiaoxiao injected herself with 3 different drugs right there in the arena. Some viewers called it cheating, but regulars quickly shut them down. The rules explicitly allowed self-provided medicine. This was what top-tier competition looked like. I'd just never seen it before. Looking at her transform in front of me, muscles swelling, body growing taller, raw power radiating off her in waves, I knew this was going to be the hardest fight of my life. But backing down wasn't an option. I gripped my spear and focused. The bell rang. She moved first, and she was terrifyingly fast. Her body slithered across the ground like a snake, following unpredictable curved paths I could barely track. This was her A-rank technique, Crimson Serpent Blade. She closed the distance in a blink, while simultaneously unleashing her newly awakened martial intent. Ice-killing intent. A wave of soul-freezing cold slammed into me. But my blazing swiftness was level 3. Hers was brand new, level 1 at best. The 2 wills collided in the space between us. No sound, no visual effect, but on the spiritual level it was like a nuclear detonation. Her ice shattered against my fire instantly, melted, evaporated, obliterated. Her mind went blank for a fraction of a second, her charging body freezing mid-stride. The shock in her eyes was absolute. She couldn't comprehend how her martial intent had been so completely crushed. That fraction of a second was all I needed. My spear was already waiting. It threaded through the gap between her crossed blades at an impossible angle, slipping past her desperate last-second block like a snake finding a crack in armor. She twisted her body with everything she had, trying to dodge the vital areas. The spear punched through her right chest. Another one. I really needed to work on my aim. The fire energy detonated inside Qin Xiaoxiao's wound, blasting her backward. Blood sizzled on the arena floor. But she was tough. She immediately jabbed a healing drug into the wound, and it started closing before my eyes. I didn't give her time to recover. My second thrust was already coming. She dodged back desperately, but I matched her step for step using basic footwork, keeping the distance locked between 2 and 3 meters, my perfect killing range. No matter how she twisted or retreated, my spear tip followed like a shadow. My martial intent was crushing her the entire time. Her speed and technique, even boosted by 3 drugs, felt sluggish and stiff under that constant burning pressure. She couldn't use even 70% of her real ability. Then I saw her reach for something else in her tactical pouch, a vial of dark purple liquid, some kind of military-grade forbidden drug, her absolute last resort. The instant her hand moved and her body rhythm broke for just a fraction of a second, I pounced. I pushed my martial intent to its absolute maximum. Not suppression anymore, annihilation. My eyes must have looked like flowing lava because she stared into them, and her entire world turned red. Her mental defenses crumbled completely. But what happened next shocked me. Instead of surrendering, something broke inside her. Or maybe something ignited. Images of her grandfather, her family's expectations, her fear of losing her position as the favored grandchild. It all drove her into a suicidal frenzy. She charged straight at me. No defense, no retreat. Pure desperation. My spear went through her heart. Clean through. But her drug-enhanced heart kept beating even with a hole in it. She slid along the spear shaft, pushing herself closer to me, blood pouring from her mouth. She poured every last drop of energy into her blades and launched the Crimson Serpent's ultimate technique. Her twin blades came alive, twisting, curving, splitting into multiple afterimages that all targeted 3 points simultaneously, both my eyes and my throat. I couldn't tell which strikes were real and which were illusions. She was dying on my spear, and she was still trying to take me with her. Qin Xiaoxiao's final attack was terrifying. Her blade split into twisting afterimages targeting both my eyes and throat simultaneously. I had a split second to react. My shield hand moved on instinct. The small buckler appeared exactly where it needed to be, blocking her blade cold. Then I slammed the shield into her chest with everything I had. The impact ripped her off my spear and sent her flying. She crashed to the ground, smiled bitterly, and passed out from blood loss. 13 straight wins. The live stream exploded. 20,000 viewers were screaming about the greatest fight of the tournament. People couldn't believe this was a freshman exam. The comments were a wall of shock, praise, and people declaring me their new idol. Mushi had been watching with her eyes closed for most of it. When she finally looked, she saw me standing alone in the arena holding my spear and shield, and nearly collapsed with relief. She was drenched in sweat just from watching. Meanwhile, Yi Qinghan, the neighbor who'd called me disgusting, was watching my fights from the medical center restroom. Somehow my battles had become her motivation. After studying my fighting style, she'd gone on a 3-win streak herself. When she saw me pierce Qin Xiaoxiao's heart and knock her away with the shield, she jumped off her sofa cheering, face flushed, fists pumping. Her feelings toward me had shifted into something she clearly didn't understand herself. Fight 14. Arena 39. My viewer count hit 20,000, almost unheard of for a non-top 5 arena stream. My opponent walked in and immediately started advertising. He faced the camera and launched into a product pitch for his Star Dragon 1 bioarmor from the Xingzhou Group, priced at 20 million credits. He bragged it could withstand impacts under 16,000 kilograms and absorb over half the force above that threshold. Turns out this guy, Zhou Hongkai, was the crown prince of a massive military equipment corporation. His father had over 1,000 children planted across various universities, all competing in combat exams while live streaming to promote the family's armor products. Zhou Hongkai himself had 18% gene potential and was on a 12-win streak, mostly because nobody could break through his ridiculous armor. Someone in the chat mentioned my name. He glanced at the comments and smirked dismissively. One spear guy? Never heard of him. Meanwhile, Sun Yuyun, the 4th-year sister of the archer I'd pinned to the wall, was watching my fight while on the phone with her recovering sister. She talked tough about getting revenge for me, but after seeing me destroy Qin Xiaoxiao, she'd quietly changed her mind. She realized I'd already surpassed what she could handle, and the smartest move was to befriend me after the exam instead. A grassroots talent with no family ties was actually the best kind of person to invest in. My 14th opponent was something else entirely. Zhou Hongkai walked into the arena and immediately started doing a live commercial. He faced the cameras and pitched his family companies, Star Dragon 1, bioarmor, complete with hand gestures, product demonstrations, and limited-time bundle offers. He even injected himself with a combat drug using an auto-injector built into his tactical pack, and turned that into a sales pitch too. His skin turned purple, his muscles swelled visibly, and he grew several centimeters taller. Then he casually mentioned that his armor could withstand anything under 16,000 kilograms of impact force. The chat filled me in. His father was the CEO of Xingzhou Group with over 1,000 children scattered across universities, all serving as walking advertisements during combat exams. Zhou Hongkai was apparently the best of them. 18% gene potential, 12 straight wins, and practically invincible because nobody could punch through his armor. Only Lu Zhenlong had managed to crack it in their previous match. He grabbed a shield hammer combo and lumbered toward me like a human tank, still advertising. He looked careless, but I could see through it. His footwork was calculated, ready to dodge at any moment. Smart guy hiding behind a dumb act. I didn't bother with any warm-up. Full martial intent, immediately. His cocky grin froze. For about 1/10 of a second, he tried to play it cool. Then the real force of my level 3 blazing swiftness hit his mind like a volcanic eruption. His mental defenses shredded instantly. His steps faltered, his body locked up. I was already moving. My spear became a streak of black lightning crossing the gap between us. The tip punched clean through his 20 million credit Star Dragon 1 armor, the one that supposedly stopped 16,000 kilograms, and buried itself in his heart. Then the fire energy detonated inside him. So much for the product demo. Zhou Hongkai looked down at the bowl-sized hole in his chest where his heart used to be, still trying to process that his invincible armor had been punched through like paper. Then he blacked out. The medics caught him before he hit the ground. 14 straight wins. The regular live stream went ballistic, but the real comedy was happening in the Xingzhou Group's paid VIP stream. Their entire chat was flooded with refund and false advertising. One second their poster boy was bragging about his armor, the next second it had a hole through it. Someone in the comments noticed my combat suit brand and posted, "Xingmi, a young person's first combat suit," which made the whole thing even more humiliating for them. Apparently back at Xingzhou headquarters, the old CEO was so furious he literally snapped his secretary's waist in half. His son had lost to a guy wearing a budget suit that cost a fraction of the Star Dragon one. As I was leaving the arena, a camera crew rushed in. A pretty reporter named Chun Chu-wei from the school's official broadcast asked for an interview. She looked relieved when I agreed. Apparently most talented freshmen had been refusing her all day. She offered me a case of combat enhancement drugs from a sponsor as thanks, which immediately improved my opinion of interviews. She asked how I felt about 14 consecutive wins. I said, "Pretty good, the opponents weren't that strong." The chat exploded with humble brag comments. Then she asked the big question, what was my peak impact force on that last strike? I thought about it and said honestly, about 10,000 kilograms. Maybe a bit more. Right on cue, the arena's data replay appeared on the big screen. Peak instantaneous impact force exceeds 10,000 kilograms. The system couldn't even measure the exact number. It just showed exceeds with 3 exclamation marks. The chat lost its mind. Someone posted a meme of 2 fingers pinching the entire Milky Way galaxy with the caption, "Just a little bit more." It got spammed thousands of times. The reporter could barely keep a straight face. But I really didn't know the exact number. I'd never had a chance to properly test my limits. The reporter asked me when I'd started learning shield techniques, since I'd only used my spear for 13 fights before suddenly pulling out a shield against Qin Xiaoxiao. I told her the truth. I'd learned it that afternoon. The chat went completely silent, then exploded. Nobody believed me. Learned it this afternoon and blocked a death blow from Qin Xiaoxiao. They thought I was either lying or mocking their intelligence. But I really wasn't joking. For her last question, she asked if I had anything to say to my final opponent. I thought about it and said, "I hope they're weak enough to let me get 15 straight wins." I walked out leaving the reporter speechless and the chat in absolute chaos. People were calling me the most arrogant person they'd ever seen, but also saying they loved it. Back at the broadcast office, the production team debated which match to feature on their main stream for the final round. They had 2 options, Arena 2 with 2nd-ranked Tang Dongshan versus 17th-ranked Lu Jinlong, or Arena 3 with 3rd-ranked Xiaoying versus me. Everyone agreed I'd get crushed by Xiaoying, so they picked the other match to avoid showing a boring blowout. The reporter who'd interviewed me actually argued against featuring my fight to spare me the embarrassment of losing on the main broadcast. Kind of her, I suppose. My arena still pulled over 100,000 viewers on its own stream, though. When I walked into Arena 3, my opponent was already there. A tall guy with hawk-sharp eyes, standing perfectly still in the center of the arena. At his feet lay over a dozen different standard weapons, swords, spears, staffs, axes, hammers, spread out like a market stall. The chat was buzzing with warnings. Xiaoying was apparently a spiritual cultivator, someone who attacked through mental and spiritual power. They said my martial intent advantage would be completely useless against him because his mind was specifically trained to resist that kind of pressure. Without my intent edge, they argued, I was just an ordinary spearman. 15 straight wins, or my first loss. This was going to be interesting. Xiaoying's registered gene potential was 16%, but his base score was a whopping 30 points, the highest I'd seen all day. He injected himself with a blue drug the moment I walked in. His eyes turned deep blue and even his hair roots glowed with an eerie blue light. When the bell rang, he didn't charge. He just stood there and spread his arms. An invisible force pulsed outward from his body, and every single weapon he'd laid on the ground, over a dozen blades, spears, staffs, axes, rose into the air simultaneously, all pointing at me from every direction. He was controlling them with pure mental power, a spiritual cultivator. The chat was screaming that I was finished. One spear against a dozen flying weapons from every angle. How could I possibly defend? But I didn't hesitate. I blasted my level 3 blazing swiftness at full power. Xiaoying smirked. He'd faced martial intent users before, and his crystal spirit mental defense had never cracked. He expected this time to be no different. Then his smirk twisted into something else entirely. My intent didn't just knock on his mental walls. It hit like a supernova. I heard it in the spiritual space between us, the sound of glass cracking. His supposedly unbreakable crystal spirit shattered into a web of fractures, and my burning will poured through every crack like wildfire. He screamed, grabbing his head. All his floating weapons crashed to the ground at once. By using spiritual power to directly oppose my martial intent, the backlash when it broke was devastating. His mind took catastrophic damage from a single collision of wills. I was already sprinting at him. He bit his tongue hard enough to snap himself back to consciousness and launched 2 fallen daggers at me with his remaining mental power, one from the front, one from behind. My shield handled both. Basic small shield plus Chen's flying shield technique. 2 perfected D-rank skills working together seamlessly. Block, deflect, swat. The chat couldn't believe I was suddenly a shield expert on top of everything else. I closed in again, spear aimed at his heart. In that moment of absolute desperation, Xiaoying pushed his cracked spirit to its absolute limit. Blood gushed from his nose as he forced out every drop of spiritual energy he had left. His combat suit blazed with white light, and a visible membrane of pure energy formed across its surface like rippling water. A spiritual energy shield. His last defense. Xiaoying's energy shield could supposedly withstand impacts under 20,000 kilograms. My first thrust slammed into it and sent cracks spiderwebbing across the surface, but it held. Behind me, I could sense the weapons he'd dropped earlier trembling back to life, rising up for a final backstab aimed at my spine. I didn't panic. I didn't turn around. Second thrust. Same crack point. Third. Fourth. Each hit deepened the fractures. The shield screamed under the pressure. Xiaoying was falling apart. Blood poured from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, 7 orifices bleeding simultaneously. Every impact through the shield hammered his already shattered spirit. He was staring past me at those weapons creeping toward my back, eyes wild with desperate hope. Just a little more. Kill him. Fifth thrust. The shield exploded into 1,000,000 points of light. My spear went straight through into his heart. Fire energy detonated inside. At that exact moment, the weapons behind me reached my back, but with Xiaoying's heart destroyed, his mental control died instantly. They bumped against my armor with the force of falling sticks and clattered to the floor. They hadn't even scratched the surface. 15 wins. 0 losses. From rank 9,988 to rank 3. The final standings appeared on every screen across campus. First place, Chen Shuani with 34 points. Second, Tang Dongshan with 33. Third, me with 25. The gap was massive, but my base score had been 10, while theirs were probably in the 20s. I'd earned every single point through pure combat, winning all 15 matches against increasingly powerful opponents. The livestream chat broke every record. Over 100,000 viewers witnessed me take down the 3rd-ranked spiritual cultivator in the most dramatic finish of the entire tournament. People were calling it the real championship match that the official broadcast had missed. I was completely drained. 15 fights pushing my martial intent to the maximum had hollowed out my spirit. I just wanted to go home and sleep. But before I could leave, I heard footsteps rushing down the corridor. Reporter Qin Shuwei came sprinting toward me with her entire camera crew, face flushed and sweating, looking like she deeply regretted not choosing my arena for the main broadcast. Reporter Qin Shuwei came sprinting at me, practically trembling with excitement. She couldn't believe she'd witnessed and recorded what she called the most legendary performance in the school's recent history, bottom-ranked freshman going 15-0 to finish 3rd overall. She asked how I felt. I told her I was tired and wanted to sleep. The chat found that hilarious. She asked about the scoring gap. I had 25 points while 1st and 2nd place had 34 and 33. I said honestly that the system wasn't fair to students with lower starting potential and hoped the school would fix it. Everyone thought I was being sarcastic, but I genuinely meant it. Starting at 10 points while others began at 20-something was a real handicap. For her final question, she asked about my goal for the elimination round. I looked at the camera and said 2 words, keep winning. After the interview, she asked to take me to dinner. I turned her down, too exhausted. She settled for adding me as a friend. When I opened my terminal to accept her request, the screen was a wall of notifications. 99 plus unread messages, 99 plus friend requests. At the top was Mushi's message. I roasted a whole sheep and a whole cow for you. Then the official announcement. Tomorrow was a rest day, with the elimination round starting the day after at 8 a.m. Only the top 200 advanced. Below that were congratulations from my father-in-law, Uncle Jinyun, Mujia calling me his one and only god, Qian Kuan spamming emoji, and the Zhou and you family patriarchs congratulating me while subtly pushing for more cooperation. I accepted Chun Shui's friend request and hit mark all as read on everything else. Instant peace. She immediately messaged asking to have dinner privately tomorrow. I told her we'd talk after the second stage ended. She replied with a disappointed, okay. Dinner? With the elimination round coming in 2 days, every minute was precious training time. Unless eating dinner could somehow get someone pregnant, I wasn't interested. Right outside the arena, a young man with gold-rimmed glasses intercepted me. He introduced himself as Zhao Wenba, my academic advisor. He congratulated me on 15 straight wins and gave me one firm piece of advice. If any clubs or organizations approached me before the exam ended, don't accept anything. After the tournament, the student council would hold a special recruitment session for top-performing freshmen. I could choose between joining the student council or any club I liked then. I had no idea what any of that meant. Student council? Clubs? He wouldn't explain further, just told me to focus on the elimination round and left. I messaged Lin Yuechan asking what these organizations were. Her reply came later while I was eating. They were essentially factions within the university. Join one and you'd get resources, protection, and connections, but you'd also owe them loyalty and service. She herself had joined the student council as a student, which was why she'd stayed on as a teacher after graduating. It was an organizational assignment. She also warned me not to accept any offers yet. So basically, university gangs. With benefits packages. I briefly wondered if I could join 2 at once and play double agent, then decided that was probably a terrible idea. Back home, Mushi had prepared a massive feast. The whole apartment smelled incredible. She flew into my arms the moment I walked through the door. While I ate, I thought about tomorrow, a full rest day before the elimination round. Every minute of those 24 hours needed to count for training. Then I looked across the table at Mushi. She was watching me with those soft, adoring eyes, cheeks flushed, radiating something warm and inviting. My mind immediately went to the Xian Su Heart Sutra. 4 days ago, our first attempt had failed because I couldn't control the technique properly, and her cultivation level was too low. But now, after everything I'd been through, 15 fights, massive spiritual growth, deeper understanding of energy control, I felt like this time could be different. The thought ignited something inside me. I stood up, walked over, and scooped her off her chair. She buried her burning face against my chest, whispering that last time had been her fault for being too weak. I kissed her forehead and told her she was wrong. I'd been the one who rushed it. This time would be different. I carried her to the bedroom. This time it worked. We tried the Xian Su Heart Sutra again. I adjusted the technique when I sensed Mushi struggling, but it still fell apart. Second failure. Mushi buried her face in the pillow and cried. She kept blaming herself, saying she was too weak and was holding me back. It hurt to see her like that. I pulled her close and wiped her tears. I tried to lighten the mood. We'd lasted 1 minute and 1 second this time. 2 whole seconds longer than last time. That's a huge breakthrough, I said with a straight face. She laughed through her tears. 2 seconds isn't a breakthrough. Sure it is. Maybe after 100 or 200 more tries, we'll get it. But privately, I was calculating. Each attempt drained Mushi completely, and she needed days to recover. I couldn't afford that kind of time. My mind drifted to Lin Yuechan's teasing promise. If I made the top 100, she'd teach me about the Heart Sutra. But that was probably just her joking around. A transcendent warrior wouldn't actually. No, I shook that thought away. Then I thought about the Zhou and Yu family patriarchs and their very real, very eager offers. Next door in room 165, Yi Qinghan was having her own strange evening. She'd been watching replays of my fights on loop, face flushed, heart racing. The martial intent that had once terrified her had become something she couldn't stop replaying. A mix of fear and fascination she didn't understand. She'd even sent me a friend request that I'd never noticed among the hundreds of others. For someone who'd been adored her entire life, being ignored was a completely new and painful experience. Then she heard sounds through the wall, Mushi's strained voice during our Heart Sutra attempt. She realized what was happening, and a surge of jealousy hit her so hard it shocked even herself. She couldn't understand why she was angry that some weak, ordinary woman got to be close to me while she couldn't even get a friend request accepted. She caught herself wondering if she could handle what Mushi was going through, and the thought made her face burn even hotter. Early the next morning, I headed straight to the fertility center. Why waste time on dinner invitations when this was infinitely more productive? 3 more successful conceptions. But this time, instead of permission points, the system directly unlocked 3 new Derank techniques I'd already purchased and learned the basics of: Charged Burst Fist, Whip Staff Technique, and Sky Rending Lash. Each had just 1 move, exactly my style. Then a special notification popped up. I'd passed 15 total offspring. Achievement unlocked, Spreading the Branches. The reward was incredible, a 1-day vigor elixir that would keep me at absolute peak condition for 24 hours straight. No fatigue, no energy drain, massively boosted training efficiency. I decided to save it for when I really needed it. At the training room, Lin Yuechan was still there meditating. When I walked in, she wrinkled her nose and said with a smirk, "Young man, you're certainly energetic this morning." I was confused until she explained that as a transcendent warrior, she could literally smell the hormones and life energy I'd just released. From 10 meters away. Mortifying. But I pushed through the embarrassment and reminded her of her promise. She'd said if I reached the top 100, she'd teach me the Shin Su Heart Sutra. I was now ranked 3rd. Her face went bright red. She tried to change the subject to the elimination round, then practically fled the training room. She was definitely avoiding me now. Whatever. Empty room meant uninterrupted grinding. I maxed all 3 new techniques in 3 hours flat. Whip Staff, perfection. Sky Rending Lash, perfection. Charged Burst Fist, perfection. Each one took about an hour of pure repetition. Who needs dinner dates when you can have this? Even with the D-rank techniques maxed out, I kept grinding Gale Wind Thrust over and over. The techniques themselves couldn't raise my stats anymore, but every repetition fed experience into my blazing swiftness martial intent. That was what mattered most now. I trained until 10 p.m. By then my martial intent had broken through to level 4, and everything changed. The first 3 levels had all been like different sizes of fire: a spark, a campfire, a wildfire. Powerful but crude, impossible to fully control. My burning aura would leak out constantly whether I wanted it to or not. It was either full blast or nothing. Level 4 was fundamentally different. The fire condensed into a volcano, deep, solid, rooted in the core of my spiritual world. For the first time, I had real control. When calm, I could hide every trace of my presence completely. No leaking aura, no accidental intimidation. I'd look and feel like any ordinary warrior. But when I chose to fight, I could dial the eruption precisely. 30% pressure, 50%, full blast. I could apply exactly the right amount of force for any situation while keeping my true power hidden as a trump card. It reminded me of Lin Yuechan. She wielded her intent with such effortless subtlety that I'd barely noticed it at first. I was nowhere near her level yet, but I was finally walking the same road. My stats had climbed again. Gene potential 18.6%, physical and mental at 182, spiritual energy at 140. 13 techniques maxed. And that martial intent sitting at level 4 with 888 out of 4,000 progress. Still plenty of room to grow. Back home, Mushi had outdone herself. A whole roasted cow and a whole roasted sheep waiting on the table. She stood there in her apron looking like an excited kitten watching for its owner. I hugged her from behind and told her she'd worked hard. I demolished both animals plus a nutrient solution. Every cell in my body was buzzing with energy. When I looked up, Mushi was watching me with those shimmering eyes, part adoration, part shyness, part something else entirely. We tried the Shin Su Heart Sutra again that night. The Shin Su Heart Sutra failed again. We lasted 1 minute and 5 seconds, for seconds longer than last time. I tried to stay positive and told Mushi our progress was incredible at this rate. She punched my chest weakly and blamed me through her tears and laughter. Next door, Yi Qinghan was apparently losing her mind. She could hear us through the wall and was so overwhelmed with jealousy that she actually opened her door, ready to march over. But she froze in the hallway, realized she had absolutely no excuse to knock, and retreated back inside. She spent the whole night tossing and turning, scheming about sending some other woman to approach me first as a test. I decided not to push any more training that night. Rest was important too. I held Mushi close and fell into deep, peaceful sleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling completely refreshed. Every trace of fatigue was gone. Today was elimination day. When I stepped outside, the campus atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Only 200 students remained in this tournament, every single one a genuine top talent. The first round had 100 simultaneous matches, with the system pairing rank 3 against rank 198. This time, the official broadcast chose MY Arena, third, as their featured match. My 15-win streak had made me the tournament's biggest story. The arena was packed with sponsor ads before the fight even started. The Star Dragon 1 armor commercial was playing, though they'd already replaced Zhou Hongkai's face as their model after I'd punched through his suit on live television. The commentators hyped me up as the ultimate dark horse, one spear guy, who climbed from 9,988th to 3rd with a perfect record. My opponent was Wang Haoyan, ranked 198th, who walked in carrying an Imperial military-style tower shield and Warhammer combo. The chat recognized it instantly as standard Imperial Expedition Corps equipment, a defensive specialist. The broadcast was treating this like a major event with 10 minutes of advertisements beforehand. Commercial breaks, product placements woven into the commentary, the whole spectacle. It felt less like a fighting tournament and more like a massive commercial showcase. But none of that mattered. What mattered was what I'd become overnight. Level 4 martial intent that I could now control with precision, 13 max techniques, and stats that would make most freshmen weep. Time to keep the streak going. I walked up to the weapon rack and loaded up differently this time. Spear, small shield, and 6 short javelins strapped to my back. The chat went crazy. What happened to one spear guy? Why does he look like a walking armory? My opponent Wang Haoyan carried a massive tower shield and Warhammer, classic Imperial Expedition Corps style. When the bell rang, I unleashed my level 4 martial intent at full force. But he didn't crumble. His body shook, his face went pale, sweat beaded on his forehead, yet his eyes stayed rock solid. He slammed his tower shield into the ground like a war drum, and something surged from his chest. Not martial intent exactly, but a willpower just as stubborn, thick, heavy, immovable like a cliff standing against a hurricane. This surprised me. Even Qin Xiaoxiao, with her freshly awakened martial intent, had been crushed instantly by my level 4 pressure. But this guy was holding. I circled around his shield to find an opening. He tracked me perfectly, swinging his hammer at my skull with terrifying speed. I caught it on my small shield. The impact numbed my entire arm, then pulled a javelin from my back and hurled it through a gap in his guard straight at his heart. It struck his chest and bounced off. His combat suit shattered, revealing an ancient bronze medal engraved with crossed swords and burning stars. The commentators went wild. It was a Holy War 3rd class medal, a relic from the 1,000-year galactic war that founded the Empire. The medal contained the military soul of his ancestor, which was what had been protecting his mind against my intent. I didn't care about history in that moment. His left chest was protected, so I aimed right. My spear punched through his right side, and the fire energy detonated. Blood everywhere. But instead of falling, he roared like a wounded animal, dropped his shield, and charged straight at me in a suicidal rush. He wanted to trade his life for mine. I retreated with clean footwork and put 3 more thrusts into him, each one detonating with fire energy. He finally collapsed, body riddled with wounds, and blacked out. The medics rushed him to the central hospital immediately. Afterward, I learned from the flood of online commentary who he really was, a descendant of Holy War veterans, carrying a genuine battlefield relic. The commentators explained that the medal's embedded military soul was what had shielded him from my martial intent. Back in his hometown, his grandfather, an old man with white hair but a ramrod straight back, watched the replay surrounded by dozens of family members. He stood up and smiled. The boy did well. He lost to a stronger fighter, but that spirit, refusing to die without taking a bite out of the enemy, that's exactly right. He decided Wang Haoyan should join the military after graduation. Reading all of this in the restroom, I felt something shift inside me. Those holy war soldiers had fought for 1,000 years to build the empire I lived in. The pioneer statue at our school gates represented millions upon millions of warriors, just like Wang Haoyan's ancestor, nameless heroes who'd sacrificed everything. For the first time, my martial intent, the thing that had crushed every opponent I'd faced, felt small. In the vastness of this galaxy's history, my little fire was barely a spark. During the 2-hour break, I didn't waste a second. Even in the tiny restroom, I could practice the gale wind thrust standing in place with just a short metal rod. Over 1,200 mini thrusts, each one feeding my martial intent progress bar. By the time the break ended, I was at 2,088 out of 4,000 for level 4. The main broadcast picked the first-ranked Chen Xuani versus Qin Xiaoxiao for their featured match this round. My fight was considered less exciting by comparison. Then I saw my opponent's name and almost laughed. Ling Xiaoqing, the Surrender Girl, the same towering, tanned fighter who'd taken one look at my martial intent in the first stage and immediately quit. Fate had a twisted sense of humor. She'd actually done well since our last meeting, fought hard, made comebacks, clawed her way to 97th place. She deserved credit for that. When she walked in and saw me, her face went through shock, disbelief, and finally deep resignation. But to her credit, she didn't surrender immediately this time. She psyched herself up, told herself maybe I was having an off day, maybe she'd gotten tougher. She charged at me with a war cry, trying to attack before I could deploy my intent. She was about half a second too slow. My level 4 blazing swiftness hit her like a volcanic eruption, even stronger and more concentrated than last time. Her courage, her fighting spirit, everything she'd built up shattered instantly. Her charge froze mid-step. She threw both hands up and screamed at the top of her lungs. I surrender. My spear tip stopped 3 inches from her throat, the wind from it blowing her hair back. The live stream absolutely lost it. Charge. Stop. Surrender. Flawless combo became an instant meme. Someone made a reaction GIF within minutes. Surrender Girl became famous across the entire university, not for fighting, but for having the most perfectly timed quit in tournament history. She gave me a thumbs up, then flipped me off, and walked away without looking back. I couldn't blame her at all. This really wasn't my fault. During the next 3-hour break, I kept grinding thrusts in the restroom. My martial intent climbed to 3,888 out of 4,000. Level 5 was almost there. Round 3 paired me against Deng Wenji, ranked 47th, a stocky shield and blade fighter known for his immovable mountain, martial intent. He could make opponents feel small and weak, like standing before an enormous peak. He planted his feet, activated his will, and tried to build an invisible fortress around himself. Heavy, solid, unbreakable. My fire met his mountain. It wasn't even close. His unshakable spirit crumbled like sand hitting lava. He went white as paper, stumbled backward, and surrendered on the spot. 2 consecutive surrenders now. The chat was going insane, calling it, winning without fighting, and dubbing me, the unconquerable. During the 3-hour break, I kept doing my standing thrusts in the restroom. The progress bar crept up. 3,999 for 1,000. Level 5 martial intent unlocked. The volcano in my spiritual world transformed. The magma shifted from dark red to blazing gold. If level 4 was a volcano, level 5 was a supervolcano on the verge of catastrophic eruption, storing unfathomable energy. My control became even more refined. I could apply pressure with surgical precision. Round 4, against the 23rd ranked blade specialist. His sharp, killing intent flickered out like a candle in a hurricane the moment my level 5 will hit him. 1 thrust. Done. By now, the entire star system had noticed the pattern. Every single opponent in the elimination round had been crushed by my martial intent alone, either pierced in 1 strike or forced to surrender before I even attacked. People stopped calling me a dark horse. The new name was Ancient Predator, something that crawled out of the deep and devoured everything. The broadcast team regretted not featuring my arena earlier. Their reporter Chen Shui volunteered to personally commentate my next fight. But the director laughed. My arena's independent stream already had more viewers than the main broadcast. His solution: merge all 3 top arenas into one simultaneous multi-stream. Only 12 fighters remained. I held the 3rd seed firmly. Round 5. Lu Jinlong, ranked 9th. Back during the provincial exam, he'd been untouchable, the dominant force from Tiantai, first high who'd never even noticed my existence. Now he was the lower-ranked challenger, looking up at me. When the matchup appeared, I saw a familiar name: Lu Jinlong, ranked 9th. Back during the provincial exam, this guy had been so far above me, he hadn't even registered my existence. Now he was the lower seed looking up at me in 3rd place. Life was funny like that. In the medical center, Qin Xiaoxiao had recovered from her loss to the first-ranked Chen Xuani. She saw our matchup on the broadcast and immediately shook her head. She knew Lu Jinlong couldn't beat me. After experiencing my martial intent firsthand, she was certain nobody at this level could withstand it. She even suspected my will might be stronger than the first-ranked Chen Xuani's. Lu Jinlong walked in carrying a long alloy staff. He'd clearly studied my fights. He knew testing the waters meant death against me. He needed something completely unexpected. The bell rang. He launched himself into the air instantly, releasing his own martial intent, Thunder's Fury, a wild, defiant will that formed a mental shield against my pressure. Then he did something nobody expected. He drove his staff straight into the ground and landed on top of it. He was standing on the tip of a vertical staff, 3 meters in the air, balanced perfectly like a monkey on a pole. This was apparently the staff standing technique from an A-rank weapon art called the Heaven-Reaching Staff. The commentators went wild explaining the strategy. By going airborne, he was disrupting my attack angles. My spear thrusts were optimized for ground-level targets. Aiming upward at a swaying target 3 meters high would throw off my timing. If my first strike missed, he'd dive down with a 20,000 kilograms overhead smash. The chat was amazed at the creativity. Some people thought he'd found my weakness. Mujia, watching from his dorm, typed in the chat, "This Lu Jinlong isn't worth one thrust from one spear guy." He was right, but not for the reason he thought. I looked up at Lu Jinlong perched on his stick. Good view for him, sure. But he'd also turned himself into a stationary target. The spear angle was awkward, true. But who said I only use spears? My right hand reached behind my back. In a flash, a short javelin appeared in my grip. The commentators froze mid-sentence. The male announcer stammered that javelin throwing at a moving target 3 meters up was basically impossible. His partner guessed I was just trying to force Lu Jinlong down. I didn't wait for them to finish their analysis. One step for momentum, a twist of my torso, a snap of my wrist. The javelin screamed through the air like a silver bolt of lightning, aimed straight at Lu Jinlong on his perch. His eyes went wide. This wasn't in any of the intel he'd gathered about me. Lu Jinlong had done his homework on potential opponents during the rest day, but he'd spread himself too thin. His intel on me was incomplete. He knew about one spear guy, but didn't know about my javelins. The moment my javelin left my hand, I unleashed my level 5 martial intent at full force. His Thunder's Fury will shattered like glass against mine. His mind went blank, and the dodge he'd been about to execute froze mid-motion. Standing on top of a stick 3 meters high with nowhere to go, he'd turned himself into the perfect stationary target. The javelin punched through his stomach. He screamed, somehow stayed balanced, and threw himself downward at me in a desperate all-or-nothing overhead strike with his staff. I simply stepped back and caught his attack on my small shield. Then my spear went through his heart, and the fire energy exploded. The male commentator who'd just spent 2 minutes praising Lu Jinlong's genius standing stick tactic looked like he'd swallowed a fly. His female partner quickly salvaged the moment, praising my tactical flexibility and all-around weapon mastery. The chat was merciless. Standing stick, 3 seconds. Falling down, 1 second, became an instant meme. Someone dubbed it standing target practice. I shook my head as they carried him away. Fancy tricks were just fancy tricks. What I didn't know was that over in Arena 1, the first-ranked Chen Xuani had an entire intelligence team, 3 students whose parents all worked for the Chun family's corporate empire. They'd been analyzing every potential threat to Chen Xuani's championship run. Right now, they were watching every single one of my fight recordings on repeat, frame by frame. Their sole mission was to clear the path for Chen Xuani to win the tournament in the most dominant fashion possible, and I had just become their primary target of concern. What I didn't know was that Chen Shuani, the #1 seed, had a full intelligence team analyzing my every fight. 3 students whose parents all worked for the Chun family empire had been breaking down my combat data with sophisticated models. Their analysis was alarming for them. They calculated my burst impact force exceeded 18,000 kilograms per strike. They identified my techniques, Gale Spear lineage, plus various D-rank skills like shield strikes, javelin throws, and deflection techniques. They couldn't figure out why all my auxiliary techniques seemed to be D-rank, suspecting no opponent had been strong enough to force out anything higher. But their biggest concern was my martial intent. After reviewing every fight, especially against Qin Xiaoxiao and Xiao Ying, they concluded my will had likely broken through from entry level into condensed form, the second of 4 martial intent stages. That was something normally only transcendent warriors achieved. A freshman reaching it during an entrance exam was supposed to be impossible. They immediately began designing counter-strategies for Chen Shuani. Their key insight came from my fight against Wang Haoyan. The Holy War medals, military soul, had partially resisted my intent. Chen Shuani called his grandfather, the chairman of the Qin Corporation, and requested a first-class Holy War medal. It was sent immediately. The trade-off was clear. The military soul suppressed all personal willpower equally, meaning Chen Shuani's own intent would be weakened too. But since my intent was stronger than his, neutralizing both sides actually favored him. He could then win on pure technique, resources, and physical stats. Meanwhile, I spent every break doing my lazy thrusts in the restroom. 3 hours of grinding pushed my intent to 4,588 out of 5,000 for level 5. Round 6 matched me against Xiao Ying, the spiritual cultivator I'd beaten in the first stage. He was back for revenge, upgraded equipment, better drugs, and burning with determination. He truly believed this time would be different. The rematch with Xiao Ying was supposed to be his big revenge moment. The commentators spent several minutes hyping it up, how he'd upgraded to a 50 million credit combat suit with a shield system rated for 25,000 kilograms impacts, how he was using unreleased cutting-edge drugs from his family's company, how his spiritual power had massively increased since our last fight. When the bell rang, he injected 2 more drugs. His left eye turned red, his right eye turned blue. He screamed my name and launched his signature move. Over a dozen weapons floating in the air from every direction, forming a death formation around me. Then he went further than before. He deliberately bit his tongue to force a power surge, adding 50% to his already drug-boosted 50% increase in spiritual strength. He formed a crystalline mental barrier, his strongest defense ever, doubled from what I'd faced last time. He was absolutely certain he could tank my intent this time. My level 5 blazing swiftness hit his barrier. It cracked like glass. Again, exactly like last time. What he didn't know was that since our first fight, my martial intent had jumped from level 3 to level 5. His 100% power increase was impressive, but my growth had far exceeded that. He screamed in despair as the burning wool poured through the cracks and torched his mental world. All his floating weapons lost control and crashed to the floor. Again, same scene, same result, same humiliation. The commentators were stunned. The chat went absolutely wild. Someone renamed me, One Glare Guy, since I kept winning just by looking at people. He got stronger, he spent money, and he got destroyed again, became the top comment. People were saying his warrior's spirit might be permanently broken from losing the same way twice. The best comment I saw later was, Xiao Ying, I powered up, I paid to win, and then I got one shot. Again, my spear punched through Xiao Ying's half-powered energy shield like it was nothing and went straight into his heart. Fire energy detonated inside him. He screamed, no, and it was over. Same result as last time, just faster. Chen Shuani's intelligence team was watching and getting increasingly alarmed. They confirmed my martial intent was operating at a level that shouldn't exist among freshmen. Absolute domination that no amount of drug boosting or preparation could overcome. They labeled me as Chen Shuani's #1 threat and possibly his final opponent. I didn't waste a single second on celebration. Back in the restroom, I resumed my standing thrusts. The progress bar crawled up. 4,998, 4,999, 5,000, Level 6 Martial Intent unlocked. The transformation was profound. If Level 5 was a supervolcano barely under control, Level 6 was total mastery. All that devastating power was perfectly compressed and contained within me. I could release a hair-thin thread of pressure as gently as a whisper, or unleash the full eruption to annihilate everything. Complete control, no wasted energy. I finally understood what Lin Yuechan's technique had felt like. That effortless, natural mastery where immense power looks simple. I'd reached the same kind of control, just on a different scale. While grinding, I studied videos of my next opponent, Tang Dongshan, ranked second. He was the definition of a specialist. His entire fighting style revolved around one A-rank technique called Triple Wave Slash. 3 consecutive strikes, each dramatically more powerful than the last. The first was lightning fast, testing and pressuring. The second hit 50% harder, heavy enough to break most defenses. And the third, nobody had survived it yet. Everyone who'd seen his third slash was in the medical center. My calculations put it at more than double the first strike's power. He was like a precision killing machine. Every breath, every muscle fiber optimized for those 3 cuts. Pure focus, clear mind, perfect blade intent. This was the real deal. My toughest opponent yet. When the semi-final matchup appeared on screen, me versus Tang Dongshan, the entire university erupted. This was the fight everyone had been waiting for. The commentators built up this semi-final like it was the event of the century. Tang Dongshan versus me, the established elite versus the miracle dark horse. Tang Dongshan was nothing special to look at. Average build, average face. But his eyes were like 2 unsheathed blades. He picked up a single standard alloy sword and didn't even glance at me. He just stood there, radiating a cold, pure blade intent that froze the entire arena's atmosphere. In his world, there was only him and his sword. This felt different from every other opponent. Not spiritual power tricks like Xiaoying, not drug-fueled rage like Qin Xiaoxiao, not ancestral willpower like Wang Haoyan. This was something pure, a man who'd poured his entire being into his blade until they became one thing. A true warrior. The bell rang. He announced, Triple Wave Slash, first cut, in a flat voice, then vanished. One instant he was standing across the arena. The next a blinding flash of blade light was at my throat. The high-speed cameras could barely catch a blur. I hit him with my level 6 martial intent simultaneously. It struck his blade while hard. His body shuddered. His charge stuttered for a fraction of a second, and genuine shock flashed in his eyes. My intent was far beyond what he'd expected, but it didn't break him. He bit his tongue, steadied himself, and his sword kept coming. This was the first opponent whose fighting spirit survived my full power blast. My shield intercepted the first cut. The impact was enormous. Sparks flew everywhere. While absorbing the blow with a backstep, I counter-thrust at his opening. My intent had slowed him just enough that his second slash wasn't ready in time. He faced an impossible choice. Abandon his sword rhythm to block my spear, or trade blow for blow. He chose to take the hit. My spear pierced his side, sinking deep into flesh. But instead of pulling away, this madman pushed himself further onto my spear, using my own weapon as leverage to close the distance for his second strike. Second cut. His blade came down like divine lightning. Faster, heavier, 50% stronger than the first. I pulled back desperately, barely dodging the killing blow. The sword edge scraped across my shoulder, slicing through my combat suit down to the bone. Blood seeped through the cut. For the first time in this entire tournament, I was wounded. The fire energy I'd planted in Tang Dongshan's body detonated right as he was preparing his third slash. He coughed up blood mixed with organ fragments. But this absolute madman grabbed my spear shaft with his bare hand, locking it in place so I couldn't pull it out for another strike. Fine. I let go of the spear and grabbed a javelin from my back instead. At this range, I couldn't miss. I aimed straight at his face. He saw the javelin coming. Any sane person would dodge. But Tang Dongshan wasn't sane anymore. He was gambling everything on his third cut being faster than my throw. He believed that even if the javelin killed him, as long as blade hit me first, he'd win. His third slash came. I couldn't dodge, couldn't retreat. All I could do was block. My small shield caught the blade and shattered into pieces. The sword kept going, tearing through my right shoulder. My entire right arm was severed clean off. Blood sprayed everywhere. I screamed from pure agony unlike anything I'd ever felt. But in that same instant, the exact moment my arm was cut, my left hand had already released the javelin. It punched through his left eye, exited through the back of his skull, and took a chunk of bone with it. He tried to stay standing. He wanted to see me fall first. But when he looked at me through his remaining eye and saw me still on my feet despite missing an arm, the last light in his gaze faded. We both collapsed at the same time. Two medics materialized instantly, one at each end of the arena, rushing to save us both. I looked at my empty right shoulder, blood pouring out, pain beyond description. And I thought, that 100,000 credit insurance policy was the best money I ever spent. The entire live stream went silent for several seconds, then erupted into the biggest reaction of the entire tournament. People were crying. People were calling it the greatest fight they'd ever seen. Both commentators were frozen solid. The comments were overwhelming. This isn't a competition, it's a real death match. Both of them are true warriors. This is the spirit of Galaxy Martial Arts University. Fight to the death, never retreat. I'd won. But it cost me my right arm. The semi-final was over, and the final against Chen Shuani was next. In the medical center, nanorobots reattached my severed right arm within the hour. It was wrapped in thick bio-bandages, and I couldn't use it intensely for a while, but the pain was gone thanks to heavy-duty painkillers. First time experiencing VIP medical treatment. Definitely didn't want to need it again. Looking back at that fight, my martial intent had still affected Tang Dongshan significantly, and my perfected basic shield and footwork had barely been enough to survive. Without those fundamentals, I'd be dead. Mushi burst through the door with red, swollen eyes and grabbed my good hand, crying that I'd scared her to death. I held her close and told her my arm was already reattached, nothing to worry about. Then the door opened again. Standing there awkwardly, holding a fancy gift box of nutrient solutions, was Yi Qinghan, our neighbor, the girl who'd called me disgusting, the one I'd speared through the chest on day one. She mumbled something about her company needing genetic material and that she was just passing by to check on me. From the 298th floor to the medical center. Just passing by. Sure. Mushi's eyes went sharp with suspicion immediately. Woman's intuition is terrifying. I thanked Yi Qinghan politely and said we could discuss business later. The silence that followed was excruciating. She stood there fidgeting with her sleeves, clearly wanting to say something but unable to get the words out. She finally asked if my arm was okay. I said the doctor promised 2 days of rest would fix it. More painful silence. She started to leave, then spun around at the door, face burning red. Can we add each other as friends? I opened my terminal and scrolled through the 99 friend requests to find hers. When I located it, I noticed she'd actually sent it after the very first day of competition. She'd been waiting this entire time, and I'd never even seen it among the flood. Watching me scroll through that mountain of requests to find her buried application, her face went from red to crimson. Whatever dignity she had left seemed to shatter, and she practically sprinted out of the room. Mushi watched her go with narrowed eyes. What was that about? She asked quietly. No idea, I said honestly. She held my hand tighter and told me the final match was coming. Good luck. I squeezed her hand back. No words needed. And absolutely no jinxing it with any bold promises. I don't do flags. After 3 hours in the medical pod, my right arm was back to about 97%. There was still a tiny bit of discomfort deep in the nerves, but honestly, it was way better than I expected. I thought back to my last fight, when I drove my spear straight through Tang Dongshan's skull. I didn't hold back at all, because his 3 knife strikes were just as deadly. He was the strongest opponent I'd ever faced. In that kind of life-or-death moment, even a second of hesitation would have meant my death. I checked my messages. Qian Kuan was hyping me up, and Chen Shuwei told me Tang Dongshan was out of danger. His brain tissue was being repaired and he'd need 10 to 15 days to recover. Apparently, there's some advanced cell cloning tech that can fix even a destroyed brain, as long as you get help within 30 minutes. I had no idea that was even possible. Qian Kuan explained it's cutting-edge stuff that only top cities like Tela have. That's probably why Galaxy Martial University can set up such brutal entrance exams. They've got the medical tech to back it up. During the hour-long ad break before the final, my arm recovered to nearly 99%. Then the announcers started their hype. Millions of people were watching live. They introduced my opponent, Chen Shuani, the undefeated favorite who'd won every match, and then me, the miracle who climbed from rank 9,988 all the way to the finals. When we walked into the arena, Chen Xuani picked up a three-pointed double-edged blade. He was wearing a combat suit worth 100 million credits. Then, right in front of everyone, he pulled out 3 colored syringes and injected them into his neck. The commentators lost their minds explaining what those drugs did. The first one temporarily pushed his genetic potential past 30%, giving him a base explosive power of 3,000 kilograms. And with his A-rank martial technique, each strike could hit over 30,000 kilograms. The second boosted his mental power by over 50%. The third did the same for his spiritual energy. The chat exploded. Everyone was saying I was finished, that this wasn't even fair anymore. Some said the championship should just be handed to him. Others pointed out that this is just how things work. Martial arts has always been a rich man's game. Standing in the arena, I could feel Chen Xuani's energy skyrocketing after those injections. It was like watching a prehistoric beast waking up. The pressure coming off him was genuinely terrifying. So this is what the #1 ranked fighter feels like. That's it for this part. If you want to keep watching, the next part is already up on our Patreon. And if you want more videos on this manhwa recap, leave a like, subscribe, and write a comment. It really helps us see which stories you want us to continue.